What are we coming to?
People make mistakes.
Most of the time, James thinks you should forgive them.
If they're sorry. If they mean it.
James has made some questionable decisions in his life.
Some missteps.
Everyone is just trying their best.
People make mistakes. But they also make choices.
It's important to him, that difference.
He does his best not to confuse the two.
Oh, you pretty things. Don't you know you're driving your promise and driving insane? Oh, you pretty things. Don't you know you're driving your promise and driving insane? Let me make it plain. Gotta make way for the Homo superior.
The night that Sirius shows up on James's doorstep, he's barely able to stand. He has his wand, that's all. He's not even wearing shoes.
Didn't have time.
Sirius smiles when he says it, but the expression doesn't reach his eyes, cracking at the corners of his mouth. Before that night, James had never fully understood what it meant to want someone dead, but he could have killed them. All of them. Anyone who had ever touched Sirius.
Bit predictable, aren't they?
He slips a gentle arm around his friend and starts leading him inside.
What? Shoes, you mean?
Well, yeah. Everyone wears them, don't they? Where's the fucking spontaneity? I look down and know just what I'm gonna get.
Bloody shoes?
Exactly.
Sirius's smile's a bit more genuine this time, though James can feel him trembling under his hands.
Fucking fascists.
James's mother comes down the stairs, wand lit, feet slippered.
James, what? Oh.
She stops there, halfway down the steps, and for a moment something painful flickers across her face, but then it's gone.
Sirius, love. It's good to see you. James, the den, please.
James nods, slowly walking himself and Sirius towards the sofa. Every once in a while, James feels Sirius suppress a wince.
Sorry about just turning up.
James lowers him onto the sofa.
Don't be daft.
He sits beside him, hand still on his arm, unwilling to let go.
You're always welcome, you know that.
Mrs. Potter comes into the room behind them, a cup of hot tea following beside her. She levitates it gently onto the coffee table.
Cream, 4 sugars.
Sirius grins.
You remembered.
Hard to forget a bloody toothache in a mug.
That earns James a pointed stare from his mother. Sirius's head is resting on the back of the sofa like he hasn't got the energy to hold it up.
What can I say? I like 'em sweet.
He winks at James, who grins in return. Sirius would flirt with a lamppost if he was bored enough, or scared. Sirius wraps charm around himself like armour. Euphemia kneels in front of him, her hand reaching out to gently cup his cheek. Sirius is pale. Even in the dark, James can see that, can see the circles under his eyes and the blooming purple bruise on the side of his jaw. If her frown is anything to go by, James would guess his mother sees it too.
I'm going to cast a diagnostic spell, love.
Her thumb grazes his cheek.
Is that all right?
There's a pause, a slight tightening at the corners of Sirius's eyes. He nods. Euphemia pulls her hand away and casts silently. James can feel her magic, warm and sweet, like cinnamon. Sirius's eyes flutter closed for a moment, arm going stiff under James's hand, so he gives it a squeeze. I'm here, he hopes it says. I'm here. I'm here. After a few seconds, Sirius squeezes back. Euphemia's wand drops into her lap, but she waits for Sirius's eyes to open before she speaks, teeth nervously biting into her lower lip.
I'm just going to mend your ribs and ankle, okay? There shouldn't be any lingering soreness, but if there is, you let me know.
What?
James's stomach clenches. The rage, when it comes, is a wave so high he can't see over the top. He drowns in it.
Your ribs? They broke your fucking ribs?
James!
But he can't. It's too much. It's too fucking much.
If it makes you feel better, I don't think they're actually broken.
Sirius shifts his position and barely holds back a groan.
More like, slightly cracked. Isn't that right, Effie?
He offers her a smile.
I'm going to need you to hold still.
Sirius nods again. This time, when the spells are cast, his control slips as his bones knit themselves back together. James wants to scream.
There we go.
His mother pushes the fringe back off of Sirius's forehead.
All done now.
Sirius nods, eyes closed again as he slowly sinks down onto the sofa. James moves so he can stretch his legs.
Sorry. Bit tired. Thanks, though. Thanks heaps. Thought I was gonna have to go to Mungo's. Worried they would come get me.
Even in the dark, James can see his mother holding back tears.
No. No one's going to get you, Sirius.
Is all Sirius replies, already half asleep. The two Potters stand frozen for a moment, silent in their darkened home, brimming with feelings that ache.
James, will you?
He cuts her off with a nod, going quickly to the cupboard in the hallway and getting the spare blankets and pillows.
Go to sleep, Mum.
James comes back into the room.
I'll stay with him.
He drapes the blankets over Sirius's body, gently slipping the pillow under his head.
You're sure?
James turns back to her, offering what he hopes is a reassuring smile.
Yeah, course.
It's not as though he's going to be able to sleep now anyway, and there's no way in hell he's letting Sirius out of his sight. She nods, eyes still on Sirius even as she pulls James close and kisses the top of his head.
Hey, Mum.
He catches her before she leaves the room.
Thanks.
He says lamely, causing his mother's brows to draw together.
Thank you for...
He doesn't know how to put it into words, how to say how grateful he is to his parents for loving Sirius, for seeing how desperately he needs them to, deserves for them to. James gestures vaguely to the sleeping boy on the sofa.
Just thanks.
I love you.
Love you too. I'm not going to let him go back there.
She nods slowly.
I know.
But he shakes his head.
No, I mean, not just right now. Not just this summer. I'm never letting him go back there. To them.
Yes.
A sad sort of smile finds its way into the corner of her mouth.
I know.
And then her expression shifts, as though suddenly remembering something.
Regulus.
James blinks, thrown by the sudden change in subject.
What about him?
He doesn't mean it to sound as cold as it does. His mother runs a hand over her face, looking tired.
We can't leave him there. I'll talk to Albus, see if I can...
No, Mum.
James glances quickly down at Sirius to make sure he's still asleep.
Regulus isn't like Sirius. He's... I don't know. He's one of them.
He's a child, James.
Pfft, not hardly. We're practically the same age.
She smiles a bit at that.
Yes, exactly.
James scowls.
He doesn't want to leave. He likes it there. He likes all that pure-blood nonsense. I'm not having him in my house, not having him around Sirius.
She arches her brow.
Oh, it's your house, is it?
James's cheeks flush, but he doesn't back down, arms crossing over his chest as he holds her gaze.
I'm not having him near Sirius.
A few moments of tense silence pass before Euphemia rolls her eyes.
I'm writing Albus in the morning.
Mum.
Her hand snaps up to stop him, a clear warning sign. Mrs. Potter is not a woman you want to cross, and James's protest is effectively shoved back down his throat.
I won't leave a child in that household, James. Not if I can help it. So I don't really care what you think of him. Am I clear?
Grudgingly, James nods his head.
Excellent. Good night, then.
He doesn't reply, sulkily sliding down onto the floor, pressing his back into the sofa. People make mistakes. But this? His friend showing up broken and shivering in the middle of the night? This is not a mistake. As far as James is concerned, the Blacks have made a choice, Regulus included. And it is unforgivable. It's brilliant having Sirius stay all summer. Not worrying about running out of time, not seeing that look in his eyes as the days count down. Sure, there are still moments when he drifts, to places that James can't quite get to, but on the whole it's better. He speaks about what happened in bits and pieces, like he can't handle it all at once. First to James's mum and dad, and then, when they come, to Professor Dumbledore and Alistair Moody.
They told me to take the mark.
Just once more, they keep saying. Just a few more details.
I told them to fuck off and, well, you can imagine how well that went over.
James never pushes Sirius for more. He watches the adults around them take from Sirius without even realizing it. Even his mum and dad so focused on the bigger picture. The politics, the war. They never notice how their questions strip him bare. Or just how little is holding Sirius together. Probably because he snarks his way through it, throwing out one-liners like it's his own personal one-man show. It's only James who notices how his hands shake. Or the muffaliato charm he throws over his bedroom at night. But mostly, the summer is good. Bright and warm. They play Quidditch nearly every day, twirling around one another in the yard, diving for snitches that aren't there just to see if the other will follow, tugging on broom ends and knocking bludgers about. Dumbledore comes and goes, and there is no more talk of Regulus. At least not that James hears. He's glad. That's the last thing Sirius needs.
You will try to behave, won't you?
James and Sirius face Euphemia on platform 9 3/4, the train thrumming behind them.
Try?
Sirius is grinning as Mrs. Potter places a kiss on the top of his head.
Certainly we can try.
Love a good try, I do.
James receives his own kiss. His mother rolls her eyes and elbows her husband.
God, pity Minerva.
James scrunches his nose.
Don't know why. If anything, you should pity me, the amount of homework that woman gives out.
James.
Yes, Jamie, that was terribly rude. Everyone knows she goes by Feline.
Sirius.
Cat on her bad days.
Kitty on her very bad days.
Sirius!
Oh, what's that? I think we better go. I don't want to miss the train.
Sirius tugs on James, who is bent over in a fit of laughter.
I mean it, you two. Behave and be careful.
James waves to his mother before being dragged onto the train by Sirius.
Kitty.
They push along the train in search of the others. It doesn't take them long to find them. It never does, even without the map. James has always felt there was an almost electric pull between the four of them. Sometimes he swears he can feel them tugging at him like strings wrapped around his ribs. He could find them anywhere. Sirius grins as he throws open the compartment door with a bang, nearly causing Remus to fall off his seat.
Hello, boys.
You can never just walk into a room, can you? Always got to announce yourself like the bloody queen.
Ah, but Moony,
Sirius drops into the seat next to him.
I am the queen.
James watches Remus struggle to keep a straight face.
Are you now?
Sirius nods gravely.
I can tell you don't believe me, but answer me this. Have you ever seen us both in the same place at the same time?
You're a menace, you know that?
Remus returns to his book.
It's all for you, my love.
James thinks for a moment that he sees a blush blooming on Remus's cheeks, but there isn't much time to think on it before the carriage door is thrown open again.
Bloody genetic.
The four of them stare up at their new arrival. Regulus Black stops dead in his tracks, seemingly just as surprised to see them as they are to see him.
Sorry.
Regulus's eyes meet Sirius's and then instantly go blank, like a wall has come down.
Thought it was empty.
Couldn't you hear us?
No.
His eyes are still on Sirius and it's making James's skin itch. They look similar, same dark curls and grey eyes. Sirius is taller, broader across the chest and shoulders, a beater's build. Regulus is, well, there's no other word for it. Pretty. He looks like one of the cherubs in a Renaissance painting, just with more scowling.
Can we help you with something?
Regulus startles like he'd forgotten the rest of them were there, blinking a few times before dropping Sirius's gaze.
No.
His favourite word, apparently.
Brilliant. Well, guess you'll be off then, won't you?
But he doesn't move, just keeps standing there, a weird tension on his face, jaw clenching and unclenching. The awkward silence stretches on infinitely too long as far as James is concerned. Eventually, Regulus pulls his eyes up again, looking determinedly at his brother.
You all right?
Sirius goes stiff. Even from the other side of the compartment, James can see it. The flexing in his arms, the rising of his shoulders. When he's around his family, James hardly recognizes him. All the light that pours out of Sirius on a nearly constant basis seems to dry right up. They're a bunch of bloody dementors, the Blacks are.
All right.
Peter's eyes dart back and forth between the two brothers.
Why wouldn't he be all right?
No one answers him. Remus, who must be nearly as confused, has closed the book in his lap, eyes brimming with concern as he watches Sirius like there's no one else in the room.
Yeah, sure, Reg, I'm fine.
James can feel it again. The rage that welled inside him the night Sirius showed up, broken and bloody and hurting. Regulus continues to just stand there.
You done now?
This is none of your business.
And oh boy, that about does it. James can practically feel the magic buzzing under his skin as his hands curl into fists.
To hell it isn't. You think you can just waltz in here like everything's fine? Like you lot didn't beat the shit out of him?
What? James barely pays attention to Peter. His eyes are burning holes into Regulus, who gives it right back to him.
You don't know anything.
I know enough.
I never touched him.
But you didn't stop it!
James is suddenly on his feet. Him and Regulus stand toe-to-toe. James has an inch or two of height on him, but not as much as he would have thought.
I couldn't.
There's a tiny part of James that knows that's probably true. But at this moment he can't be bothered to care.
Is that what you tell yourself?
His eyes run the younger boy up and down with disgust.
Did you even fucking try?
His cheeks flush, but the anger in his eyes comes back full force.
If you would just stop antagonizing them.
Antagonize? Oh, you've got to be fucking kidding me.
James is outraged and reaches for his wand.
James!
He looks down to see Remus staring pointedly at him, one of his hands gripping Sirius's arm. Sirius looks like he'd rather be just about anywhere else. James wants to protect him. He wants to keep him safe. He just wishes he knew how.
Enough now, yeah?
James wants to fight back. He does, but the sick look on Sirius's face keeps him still.
Fine.
He drops his hand and glares as he falls back into his seat beside a very confused Peter. Regulus looks infuriatingly smug for a bloke who just nearly got his balls hexed off. He opens his mouth to speak, but Sirius cuts him off.
Go, Reg. Just go, yeah?
Sirius's tone makes James's chest ache. His brother hesitates, just for a moment, eyes running Sirius over before he cautiously nods his head. He does not bother looking at James again before he slides the compartment door open and slips back into the corridor like the snake he is.
I'm sorry.
A smirk makes its way onto Sirius's face.
Should be. Very anticlimactic, that.
He nods his head towards the door.
Really thought I was going to get to see Reg punch in the face.
James smiles back.
I wanted to, believe me. Mooney's disappointment was the only thing holding me back.
Remus rolls his eyes, returning his attention to his book.
Don't know why, you've disappointed him plenty of times before.
I'm trying to be a better man.
Sirius leans back, one leg bent up on the seat and the other stretched out, taking up an unreasonable amount of foot space.
I see. Wouldn't be trying to impress a certain prefect, would you?
James's hands clutch his chest as he makes heart eyes at Remus.
I'm just waiting for the day that he wakes up and realizes I've been here all along.
Remus's eyes rise off his book.
Oh, I know where you've been, James, and I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole.
Remus rolls his eyes.
You lot are too easy, I swear.
Moons, we can't help it. You're fucking hilarious.
And don't let anyone tell you different.
James wipes the tears of mirth from under his eyes.
However, I was thinking of a slightly more ginger prefect.
He shoots James a look, wiggling his eyebrows in a gesture that is equal parts suggestive and ridiculous.
Really? No one's coming to mind?
James shrugs suddenly, intensely interested in his wand.
Oh, is that so?
He shrugs, even though he can feel the blush heating up his face.
Sorry, mate. Can't think of who you're referring to.
Sirius is barely holding it together.
Is this your new strategy, then? Pretending she doesn't exist? I'm not sure if that's a sign of you progressing or regressing.
Regressing. Must be.
It's not a strategy.
James adjusts his robes.
I'm just done chasing after her, that's all.
All three of the other Marauders give him near identical looks of disbelief.
You're having a laugh.
But James shakes his head, cheeks still on fire.
I'm not. It's bloody exhausting getting shot down all the time. Even I don't have an unlimited supply of pride.
It's possible he isn't being entirely truthful. He did do some soul-searching over the summer, coming to the conclusion that the badgering and big showy gestures in his attempt to court Lily Evans were getting a bit, well, tired. Predictable was not something James Potter ever intended to be. And it did actually hurt every once in a while when she would turn him down with a particularly sharp and usually fairly accurate attack of his character. But was there a tiny part of him that hoped this new leaf he was turning over would succeed in endearing him to her? Yes, definitely. Of course he wasn't about to tell anyone else that.
Wow. End of an era, isn't it?
James just shrugs again, forcing a casualness he does not feel.
Other fish in the sea and all that.
Remus blinks, looks down at his book, blinks again.
My little boy's all grown up.
Oh, shut it.
James reaches across and playfully punches his arm, Remus batting him away with his book.
Wait. Not that I'm not fascinated by James's love life, or lack thereof.
Hey.
But is someone going to explain to me what just happened with Regulus? He was acting like he hadn't seen you in weeks.
A rock plummets into James's stomach. Sirius's lazy posture grows forced.
Probably because he hasn't. Spent the summer at the Potters.
Your mum okay with that?
Sirius shrugs.
Don't think she cares one way or the other, to be honest with you. Not anymore.
Peter screws his face up while Remus sits deathly still, eyes running Sirius over like he's worried any sudden movement will spook him. It's not an unfair assumption. Sirius always gets tetchy when he talks about his family.
Won't you get in trouble?
Don't know how, seeing as how I'm not going back.
He smiles, but it doesn't look quite right, and James feels his chest squeeze at the sight of it.
Not going back.
Remus's gaze jumps from Sirius's face to James's. James nods.
He's taking up permanent residence at mine, fucking drifter.
Ooh, like that. Makes me sound dead mysterious.
Sirius grins.
Now, which one of you suckers wants to lose at exploding snaps?
And that was that. It felt good being back in the dormitory. It always felt good, the four of them together, like they belonged. Admittedly, it felt less good to be back in class. It wasn't that James had an issue with school on a practical level. He was, all things considered, rather brilliant, which had the unintended effect of making school a bit of a chore. The first few years he got a kick out of being top of the class, but the shine had worn off. Nowadays he let Remus and Lily fight over the top spot. He had more important matters to attend to. Pranks to pull, chaos to spread, etc., etc. Sirius was the same. Or he had been. Things were a little different this year. If he was forced to admit it, which he sometimes was by a particularly concerned werewolf, he would say that Sirius was being more reckless this year than he had in the past. There was a chaotic energy that seemed to hover beneath his skin and threatened to explode at any moment. Pity the poor saps who were around when it did.
It's the second week.
Remus stares at him across the library table as James tries half-heartedly to get through his potions homework.
Surprisingly, I do own a calendar.
He doesn't need to look up to know Remus is rolling his eyes.
He's been in detention practically since we got here.
James shrugs.
That's not all that strange for him.
There is another pause, no doubt to accommodate more eye-rolling.
James.
It's the shift in his tone that finally makes James look up. Remus sounds scared. He meets Remus's giant, beseeching brown eyes. James drops his quill and runs a hand through his mop of hair.
Yeah, alright. It's been a bit full on.
It's not that Sirius had done anything particularly outlandish. Transfiguring Mrs. Norris into a duck, sticking the Slytherin cutlery to the table with a permanent sticking charm, setting a bunch of bludgers loose in the halls, that one had been a tad extreme. While he was sure Remus was concerned for all the right reasons, he usually was. Personally, the thing James was most peeved about was the fact that he hadn't been consulted on a single one of these stunts.
They were spur of the moment.
Sirius had said when James broached the topic.
Just right place, right time. You know, if I'd thought about it for even a second, I'd have told you.
Shockingly, this had not remotely satisfied James's ego.
I'm worried about him.
Remus brings James back to the present.
I know.
Remus's cheeks go pink as he looks down, fiddling with his quill.
I feel like I'm flying a little blind here. I know that something happened this summer, but I don't... I mean, he didn't just walk out of that house. And I know it's not really my business.
Says who?
Remus looks up at that, sending James a grateful smile.
Listen, Mooney.
He puts his arms down on the table, leaning closer to his friend.
We're a team, yeah?
I swear to Merlin, if you're about to make a Quidditch reference...
No. I wouldn't do that to you.
You absolutely would.
James pushes playfully at Remus's shoulder.
I'm just saying. Trying to say. It's all four of us. We're in this together.
Remus arches his brow.
In what together?
James gestures to the space around them.
This, life, all of it. We're in it together. You care about him, you want to help. I get it. I think he should tell you the whole story, really I do. But I can't tell you, because it's not mine.
Remus's eyes go wide.
I wasn't trying to.
James waves a lazy hand, knocking his worries away.
I know, Moons, I know. I'm just telling you so you understand that there's not some secret club between the two of us.
There's an uncomfortable pause that James was not entirely prepared for.
I mean...
Remus shrugs lightly.
There is a bit.
He knows they're not supposed to, but those words sting, and James finds himself sitting back, running a frustrated hand through his hair.
It's fine, James.
Remus is clearly trying to cover up how very not fine it is.
You're allowed to have a best friend.
James scowls.
I have 3 best friends.
Remus arches a skeptical brow, but James refuses to back down.
Jesus, James, all right.
James smiles.
I love being right.
I don't think that's exactly what I said.
The little smile still in the corner of his mouth is enough to satisfy James.
Listen, Moons. Me and Sirius were similar. At least in the obvious ways. The ways that everyone can spot. More than you and me, or me and Pete. But that doesn't mean I love you any less, yeah?
Remus blinks at him, a look on his face that James can't quite read.
James? Are you proposing?
Why?
He arches his brow suggestively.
Would you say yes?
Absolutely not.
He clutches his chest.
Remus, you wound me.
Remus rolls his eyes, picking up his quill again.
I'm sure you'll live.
He hovers the point over his parchment, but doesn't press down.
Thanks for saying that. It's appreciated.
James nods.
Course.
And Sirius?
Sirius.
He scrubs at his face with his hand before dropping them back on the table.
I think we just have to, keep an eye on him. Be there. When he needs us.
Reckon we can handle that.
Yeah, me too.
There's a beat of silence before they both turn reluctantly back to their homework. Well, James is reluctant. Remus seems perfectly happy. But then the bastard has already finished his potions and is very rudely refusing to let James copy.
Hey, James?
James's eyes flick up briefly, but Remus's are still on the parchment in front of him.
I love you too, just so you know.
And that's so very charming and so very moony that James's grin is almost too big for his face.
I'm thinking July.
Remus looks up.
July?
For the wedding.
James ducks under the table as a quill is launched at his head. The first time he sees Regulus after the train, James is sneaking down to the kitchens under the invisibility cloak sometime after midnight. It's the 3rd week of school and Sirius's stunt pulling has not in any way diminished. James is worried it's starting to prematurely age Remus. The problem with Sirius is you have to let him spin out a bit. Not too far, of course, but it's like his feelings are too big. Too big to speak or think, so he has to act. James rounds a corner and nearly runs headlong into the person on the other side. Luckily, he catches himself in time, flattening out against the wall as a very purposeful-looking Slytherin pushes past him. It takes a few moments for his brain to catch up, fitting the curly black hair and haughty expression into place. By the time he realises who it is, Regulus is already halfway up a flight of stairs, headed very much away from the Slytherin common room. For a moment James is frozen, unable to decide which is stronger, his hunger or his curiosity. He's barely made a decision before he's taking the stairs 2 at a time, trying to close the gap between him and Regulus before he loses him. The younger boy moves nothing like Sirius. He's all rigid straight lines and perfect posture. Makes James want to trip him. Pretentious prick. If he hadn't been so preoccupied with the position of Regulus's shoulders and arms and hips, he probably would have realised where they were headed a lot sooner. But it's not until Regulus is throwing open the door with James close behind that he realises they've climbed all the way up to the astronomy tower. James leans against the outer wall, watching as Regulus walks towards the edge of the tower. In the summer, when it doesn't get quite so cold after the sun sets, this is where people come to snog. And maybe a bit more if they're feeling adventurous. But somehow James can't quite picture Regulus being the type for a quick hookup. He really is nothing like Sirius. The other boy is leaning over the edge of the railing, eyes on the sky, which is, admittedly, rather stunning at this time of night. All velvet black and sparkling stars. The moon is beginning to fill out. something James has learned to watch with wariness. He keeps expecting someone to come through the door. Surely this is some kind of rendezvous, even if not of the sexy variety. But no one comes. The only thing that happens is Regulus pulls a telescope from his pocket, unshrinking it with the wave of his wand and then peering at the sky. For a horrifying minute, James wonders if he's just gone and got himself stuck up here watching Regulus do his astrology homework. James pushes off the wall and steps closer, watching as Regulus spins a dozen different dials, adjusting the lenses. Whatever he's doing, it's practiced. Nothing about his fingers is unsure. He's always thought of Regulus as being so much younger than them, even though there's only a year between them. But he's grown over the summer. James noticed his height on the train, but now he can see that his shoulders and chest have started to fill out, his hair longer, like Sirius's except neater. Eventually, Regulus's hands stop moving. He stares through the telescope for a solid few minutes before sighing and straightening up, eyes still on the sky.
She's gotten worse, you know, since you left.
James jumps at the sound of his voice, surprised, and momentarily afraid that he's somehow let the invisibility cloak slip. But no, Regulus isn't looking at him. His eyes still staring straight ahead.
Did you even think for 1 second about what would happen to me? I don't know how to handle them anymore. I used to. But lately it's... Fuck. Lately I can't breathe.
His voice has gotten thick and James thinks there's a chance he might actually be crying, but when he looks up again his face is dry. He scrubs at it with his hands. His eyes get caught in the moonlight and the sight makes James's breath catch in his chest. There's something overwhelming about them. He doesn't think he's ever seen Regulus look this full before. Normally he's a stiff cutout of a person parroting his parents, practically two-dimensional. But not here. Not tonight. Tonight he feels so big. With another piercing look through the telescope, he waves his wand and the thing shrinks to the size of a keychain. James watches him slip it into his pocket, watches him go back into the castle. He feels off kilter. The entire time he's known Regulus, he's been a spoiled, spineless git who treated Sirius like he was a disappointment, an embarrassment. But whatever just happened, and he's still not entirely clear on what just happened, it didn't fit. He's still stewing over it 15 minutes later when he walks through the portrait and into the Gryffindor common room, invisibility cloak in hand.
Oi!
He looks up and sees Sirius, Peter and Remus all waiting by the fire, everyone else clearly gone to bed. Sirius raises his brows and gestures emphatically at James's visibly empty hands.
What the hell, Prongs? Where are the snacks?
Snacks?
But as soon as the word is out of his mouth, it dawns on him why he left in the first place.
Right, sorry. Filch was about, so...
He shrugs before moving towards the staircase.
Filch? Since when has Filch ever stopped us from doing anything? You had the cloak, for fuck's sake!
James doesn't bother replying, suddenly feeling incredibly tired as he jogs up to the dorm room. He doesn't put on pajamas, just strips down to his pants and crawls under the covers, closing the bed curtains around him. He wants to sleep off whatever the hell this weird feeling is that's sitting in the pit of his stomach. Despite his best efforts, his mind keeps lingering on the memory of Regulus's face. Those stupid fucking eyes. The last thing he hears before falling asleep is Regulus's voice in his head whispering over and over again.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
He never gets used to it. The full moon. It starts a week before. Remus goes to bed early. He gets headaches, backaches, loses his appetite. James hates it. Hates that there's nothing he can do, and that everything he says just seems to make things worse. Remus can't stand being fussed over, or when they hover around him. James gets it. Sirius gets it less, which is ironic, considering he can be such an antisocial prick when he's in a mood. On the really bad moons, Remus can't get out of bed. On the better ones, he drags himself through his classes. Those days are the most stressful, if James is honest, because Remus is so sensitive. He winces at the light, the noise of being touched, which sends Sirius into overprotective mode and means that James spends the whole day trying to keep the both of them in one piece.
Pads, it's serious. Come on, mate, calm down.
James has one arm wrapped around Sirius's middle as he drags him down the hall.
I'll calm down when McCallan learns to watch where the fuck he's going!
Sirius aims at the quickly retreating back of a Hufflepuff third year.
Merlin's tits, you want to try not to make me go deaf at the tender age of 15.
James is still dragging Sirius along, Peter and Remus up ahead, having not stopped to witness the spectacle that was Black v. McCallan.
Prick.
At least you're self-aware.
Sirius scowls at him.
I meant McCallan.
He was just trying to walk down the hall, you bloody maniac.
He ran straight into Mooney.
James rolls his eyes.
He barely touched him, and it's not as though it was on purpose.
Sirius looks mutinous.
He winced, Bronze.
James finds his eyes trailing to the sandy blonde head in front of them.
I know.
He doesn't bother pointing out that on days like today, Remus winces if you breathe too hard near him. He really ought to stay in the dorm. Not that he ever would. He has to be practically catatonic before he'll consider missing class.
Oh, good.
Remus intones as they catch up to him and Peter outside the common room.
He stopped shouting.
The portrait swings open and the four of them tumble inside, Sirius looking sufficiently cowed.
Sorry, Mooney.
Sirius has his hands in his pockets. Remus looks over at him, a weak smile managing to pull at his mouth.
It's fine. Just maybe try not to fight everyone who steps near me, yeah?
Sirius glares at a group of second years who've dared to start walking in their direction. James is pretty sure he hears one of them actually squeal in fear. It's a miracle they make it up to their room without anyone being challenged to a duel.
I'm serious, you know.
Remus makes a beeline for his bed, more out of breath than he should be and with a sickly sweat covering his skin. Sirius's eyes light up.
No,
James has his wand in Sirius's face before he can speak another word.
I swear to Merlin if you finish that sentence.
Sirius's hands come up in mock surrender.
Don't know why you're pointing that thing at me. Mooney's the one who started it.
He sends Remus a wink over James's shoulder that earns him a haggard huff.
I like him better than you.
James drops his wand.
Oh, please, you couldn't live without me.
James rolls his eyes, knocking his shoulder into Sirius's.
Prick.
Twat.
Sirius knocks him right back. It feels good, joking around after the day they've had. A break in the tension that's been pulling at the four of them, ready to snap. James exhales and feels his shoulders drop away from his neck.
Sorry, Mooney. You were saying something before Jamie so rudely interrupted us.
But Remus has seemingly stopped paying attention, sitting on his bed with his head in his hands, his whole body rigid.
Remus?
Sirius steps forward, James also inching closer. Sometimes on the day of the transformation, things can happen too soon. One bone breaking hours before the moon has risen. One organ beginning to shift when the rest of the body has yet to wake up. It's rare, but it happens, leading to frantic emergency hospital wing visits. The first time was the worst, but it never stops being scary.
Sorry.
Slowly, Remus pulls his hands away from his face, and James thinks he hears.
Headache.
James almost laughs at how inadequate that is. Even just looking at Remus, you can tell the word headache doesn't cover it. It's another few minutes before Remus actually manages to lift his eyes off the floor, looking directly at Sirius.
I don't need you to protect me.
Sirius blinks.
What?
That's what I was trying to say before. That I meant it. I'm not some invalid. I can handle myself.
A series of emotions flicker across Sirius's face so quickly that James can't catch any of them.
I know that.
Do you?
Peter, who had been lying face down in his bed, sits up at that, sending James a worried look across the room. This is not going anywhere good.
Yeah, of course I do, but just because you can handle it doesn't mean you should have to.
Sirius?
Remus passes a hand over his face.
I appreciate that, but I don't need a bloody bodyguard.
Sirius crosses his arms over his chest.
You're being dramatic.
He's really not. You go more mental around the full moon than he does.
Peter has to duck to avoid the pillow Sirius chucks at his head. James is grateful for the interruption. They're all strung too tightly for this conversation, and the last thing anyone needs is Remus and Sirius going at each other. It doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it's bloody vicious.
I need you to have some faith in me, Sirius, alright?
The pair of them are staring at one another so intensely, James feels like maybe he should leave the room.
Mooney, I'll build you a bloody church if that's what you want.
James earns a pointed stare from Remus,
Don't encourage him.
but he's clearly fighting off a smile.
Since when does Sirius need encouragement to be an idiot?
Oi!
Remus rolls his eyes. With a potential row averted, James finds himself following Pete's example and collapsing onto his bed. His whole body sighs with relief, sinking into the extraordinarily soft mattress. He's almost certain the beds at Hogwarts have been charmed because he's never slept on anything so soft.
He's still a founder, though.
You don't think that this is a little bit of a fetish you have there, Pete?
You're calling me wanting Salazar Slytherin a fetish? No! He's an old man. I'm pretty sure he's bald.
Are you sure? Are you sure? I mean, look at him. I mean, he's batting his big blue eyes at you. I don't even know if he has blue eyes.
For it to be fetish, it has to
His
be
eyes open and he props himself up on his elbows to see that Remus has closed his bed off. Across the room, Sirius and Peter have stopped their bickering, Sirius sending James a concerned look.
Hey, Moons. You need anything? Food? Water? Pepper up?
No, just quiet would be good.
James nods even though Remus can't see him, sliding off his mattress and back onto his feet.
Come on, Pete. Let's go.
Sirius is already at the door. Peter looks at him with confusion.
Go where?
Out.
James joins Sirius at the door.
But we just got in!
Yeah, but Mooney wants quiet, so we gotta clear out.
I can be quiet?
Yeah, not likely. Come on, you twat, let's go. Chop chop.
Peter follows them out of the room.
Thank you.
It's a rather uneventful evening, all things considered. They spend most of it in the common room, one of them sporadically going upstairs to check on Remus. They bring him a plate from dinner, knowing he probably won't be well enough to eat any of it. By 7 o'clock, they're all lounging about by the fireplace again. Pete playing chess with one of the fourth years, Sirius chatting up Mary while she sits shamelessly on his lap, and James trying very resolutely to not look or think about the redhead doing her charms work in the corner. In fact, he is not thinking about her so hard that he doesn't even notice that Remus has come down.
Since when is that a thing?
James startles, turning around surprised to see a pale Remus behind his chair. He's sitting far enough from the others that no one else seems to have noticed his arrival.
Since when is what a thing?
Remus gestures with his chin, and James follows his gaze to Sirius and Mary, who seem to have decided that snogging one another in the middle of the common room is perfectly acceptable behaviour.
Dunno. Been flirting with each other since last year, though, haven't they?
Have they?
That brings James's attention back to Remus. He looks like he's in pain, lips pressed together, eyes tight, but then he is in pain, so that's not really surprising.
You okay, Mooney?
Remus blinks, eyes still across the room. It takes a few seconds before he seems able to tear them away, swallowing thickly.
Yeah, just the full moon, you know.
James nods slowly, not sure why it doesn't sound like the truth.
Heading to the hospital wing.
Yeah.
Remus wraps the sweater he's wearing more tightly around himself.
Better get going, actually. She'll give me hell if I'm late.
I'll come with.
James gets to his feet.
You don't have to.
But James waves his words away, already walking towards the portrait, Remus trailing slightly behind. They walk in silence. The corridor's mostly empty, people either still in the Great Hall or tucked away in their dorms for the night. Which means Remus is likely stressing about whether or not he'll be well enough to make it to classes tomorrow. He won't be, but James doesn't point that out. Especially since he knows that Remus will end up going anyway, which means Sirius will inevitably end up trying to fight someone. James lifts his glasses and massages the bridge of his nose, already tired.
So, how's Quidditch going?
Merlin, you must be desperate for conversation if you're willing to talk about Quidditch.
Remus smiles at him out of the corner of his mouth.
Mostly I just know it's a conversation I won't be expected to contribute much to.
I'll never understand why you hate it.
I know you won't.
James looks over at him, but the smile is gone now, his face tense and nervous.
Really, Moons? Are you okay?
James quickly corrects himself.
I know that you're not physically. I'm not asking. You just seem a little bit more, I don't know, sad.
Remus doesn't answer right away, doesn't answer for a long time actually, doesn't look at James either. When they slow in front of the hospital wing doors, James half expects him to just walk on through without another word, but he doesn't.
I hate this.
He looks small in a way Remus almost never does. He isn't loud and out of control like James and Sirius, but he's strong. When Remus John Lupin puts his foot down, there is no negotiating, No changing his mind. He's like a fucking mountain, commanding authority and respect in a way that James and Sirius never could. So seeing him like this, seeing him waver, it makes something in James's chest ache.
Sometimes I just wish...
Remus closes his eyes.
that I was someone else, anyone else. Anything has to be better than this, than me.
James's insides twist, racked by the pain in Remus's voice. It takes him a while to get himself under control enough to speak.
I know this is going to make me sound like a selfish dick. But personally, I'm so fucking glad you're you.
There's a moment of stillness in which James is almost positive he said the wrong thing, but then Remus opens his eyes, and they're watery, but he's smiling again, even if it's only a little.
Thanks.
There's too much in that word for either of them to fully appreciate.
Of course.
Remus presses the heels of his hands into his eyes.
Well, I'll see you, I guess.
James nods.
You will.
And with that, Remus turns away, and James can't quite make himself move even when the door closes. There's too much time before they have to leave for the shack, and James is too twitchy to go back to the dormitory. He needs to do something. To move. Part of him feels like grabbing the cloak and going back to sit with Remus until it's time. It's not that he's never heard him talk like that before. Of course he has. Every few months there's a particularly bad moon that makes Remus's gaze hard to hold. The three of them being with him, it helps, but it doesn't fix anything, and James hates that. Hates that the best thing he could come up with doesn't even come close to a solution. James stumbles to a stop, somewhere near the library. Admittedly, he hadn't really been paying attention to where he was going.
Oh look, I think he's going to cry. Are you gonna cry, little baby?
Merlin, your poor mother, stuck with two pansies for sons.
James already has his wand out even before he hears the third.
Stop playing with your food, Mulciber. Some of us have places to be.
Without another thought, James steps around the bend. There's three of them, all Slytherins, of course. Mulciber with his hand on some kid's throat, holding him to the wall. Avery and Snape standing beside him. Snape looks bored. Avery giddy.
Got a hot date with the giant squid, Snivellus.
James casts a wordless Incarcerus at Mulciber, who is instantly thrown to the ground as ropes snake around his arms and legs. James can't help but grin. He's been practicing that one.
Fucking Potter!
Expelliarmus.
James catches Avery's wand as it flips through the air. He barely has time to blink in Snape's direction before he hears the beginning of
Levercorpus.
He dives to the side just as the spell fires, missing him by an inch and cracking the stone wall behind him. James straightens up with two wands in his hands.
Careful there, Snivellus. Wouldn't want our little prefect getting into trouble now, would we?
The pair have their wands up and ready, but neither moves. Snape's face is pinched, his lanky hair curtaining it on either side. Out of the corner of his eye, James sees Avery take a step forward and quickly points his own wand at him.
It's not gonna let you cast. It's not loyal to you.
Wanna bet?
The whole time he doesn't take his eyes off of Snape.
Will someone get rid of these bloody ropes?
James arches his brow.
Sounds like your friend could use some help there.
You better watch your mouth, Potter.
Is this about the squid comment? Honestly, I'm happy for you. I hear she puts out.
Snape fires off the stupefy, but James blocks it easily.
See, this is why you are always so crap at Quidditch.
James is enjoying himself perhaps a little too much for someone currently outnumbered 3-1.
So fucking predictable.
I noticed you stopped making a fool of yourself in front of Lily.
There's a leer hanging in the corner of his mouth.
Finally realised she'll never look twice at a moron like you.
Admittedly, that stings more than James would like it to. A few choice memories of his proposals to Evans sneaking unwelcome into his thoughts.
That depends.
He shakes his head clear, happy to find his voice unaffected.
Have you?
Snape's face clouds over and James is certain he's about to get hexed again, but he doesn't. Something shifts. Snape straightens up, a cocky smirk replacing his scowl.
I'm going to enjoy it, you know.
His words make as little sense to James as his sudden change in mood.
You're going to enjoy it? Enjoy what, you creep? Fucking the giant squid.
But for the first time in their lives, Snape doesn't rise to the bait.
This is all irrelevant, Potter. All so insignificant compared to what's coming. And it's not going to be long now. I can wait. I can be so patient.
Oh well, don't stop there, Snivellus.
James adjusts the grip on his wand, eyes doing a quick scan of the corridor, trying to figure out what he's missed.
Share with the class, why don't you?
But Snape only smiles.
I just hope I'm there to see it.
Now James is starting to get irritated.
See what?
See them break you.
He slides his wand back up the sleeve of his robes like James isn't still armed and aiming at him.
Break me.
Get him up, we're done here.
He kicks Mulciber with the toe of his shoe before turning away and skulking down the corridor.
What the fuck, Snape?
James has half a mind to follow. The problem is, Snape put his wand away, and as much of a git as he is, James isn't about to start firing hexes at someone who isn't armed.
Oi!
James brings his attention back to the two idiots still in front of him. Mulciber, now teetering on his feet, still bound by James's ropes. Avery, scowling.
My wand, Potter.
He holds out his hand expectantly. James arches his brow.
No, please. Come now, Avery. Surely your mother taught you better than that.
Give me my wand.
His face is so red and angry, James half expects it to burst open. He considers toying with them a little longer, but he really should be heading back to the others.
You want this?
He holds up Avery's wand, twirling it between his fingers.
You know I do, you twat.
James nods, barely holding back a grin.
Well, alright then.
He winds his arm back and chucks the wand down to the other end of the corridor.
Bastard!
Go on, doggy. Fetch.
Avery takes off after his wand.
Hey! Hey, wait! Fucking Merlin's tits, wait!
James can't control himself anymore as he watches Mulciber hop down the corridor like some kind of monstrous rabbit. It's not until then that he remembers the fourth member of the party, the victim, still sitting when Mulciber dropped him, back to the wall, knees pulled up. James feels his heart stutter for a moment.
Regulus.
Grey eyes meet his. Despite his current state, there isn't a bit of embarrassment in Regulus's stare. If anything, he looks resigned.
Yes, sorry. I would have made myself known sooner. Only, I thought it might take away from your heroics if you realised who you were saving.
James blinks, still adjusting to the fact of his presence.
You think I would have let them carry on if I realised it was you?
Regulus just stares back at him flatly, which only manages to irritate James.
I wouldn't have. Of course I wouldn't have.
There's a brief pause before a snarky smile spreads across his face.
No, I suppose you wouldn't. Saintly reputation to uphold and all that. Gosh, what must it be like to be so righteous?
Regulus either doesn't expect or desire an answer because he gets to his feet, picking up his fallen wand and books and turning to give a gaping James Potter another hard look.
Well.
He runs James over with his eyes.
Cheers.
He turns on his heel, walking down the now empty corridor. James could let it go. He absolutely could. He certainly has more important things to be doing right now than bothering with Regulus Black. He could let it go, except, of course, that he can't at all.
What the hell was all that about then?
He falls in step with the younger boy. Regulus sends him a look out of the corner of his eye.
Oh joy, you're following me.
James pointedly ignores that comment.
With Snape and them. Didn't think Slytherins picked on their own.
Didn't you?
And, well, James has no idea what to do with that.
Regulus.
Please stop calling me that.
Well, I can't call you Black.
And why not?
They round another corner and James realises with some trepidation that they're heading toward the dungeons. He'll be outnumbered by a lot more than 3 down there.
I don't know, 'cause your brother's my best mate.
Regulus sends him another sidelong glance.
I don't know what that has to do with me.
It would be weird.
I assure you, it wouldn't.
Right, okay.
He runs a hand through his hair.
Say I call you Black. Will you tell me what happened then?
Regulus rolls his eyes.
Severus asked me to do a favour for him.
James waits for more, but Regulus is frustratingly unforthcoming.
Based on that little melodrama, I'm guessing you told him no?
I told him to blow me.
Regulus startles so hard he almost drops his books.
Christ!
James tries to contain himself.
What the hell was that?
It's called laughter. You should try it sometime.
Regulus glares.
That was not a laugh. That was a fucking banshee cry.
But James only smiles.
I'm choosing to take that as a compliment.
I promise you it wasn't one.
Oh well, too late now.
There's a curl of pride in James's stomach at the sight of a smile hiding in Regulus's mouth. He's never seen that before. Never seen Regulus do anything but scowl.
So, he didn't take you up on your offer then?
Funnily enough, no.
James smirks, shoving his hands in his pockets as they pass by a pack of Ravenclaw girls. James is usually quite happy to be the subject of school gossip, but for some reason this attention makes him feel antsy.
I'm surprised you let Dumb and Dumber back there disarm you.
Regulus is keeping his eyes on the space ahead of him and very resolutely off of James.
They didn't disarm me. Mulciber punched me. In retrospect, I really should have seen that coming.
James looks over at him and notices the bruise on his jaw for the first time. It sends an eerie shiver down his spine, images of Sirius standing so lost and hurt on his doorstep. He looks away.
Well.
Regulus comes to a stop in the middle of the corridor, pulling James up short. The two of them stand facing one another for the first time. God, James can't help but think. Those fucking eyes.
As strange as this all has been, I really think it would be best for us to part ways now.
James just stares blankly back at him.
As much as I appreciate your assistance.
Assistance?
James thinks that's a funny way of saying thanks for saving my ass. Regulus ignores him.
Being walked to my dorm by James Potter is hardly going to help matters.
I'm not walking you to your dorm.
Regulus blinks at him, looks down the hall, then blinks at him again.
Potter, that is literally what you're doing.
No, well, it's just when you put it like that, it sounds like... 'Cause I'm not. It's just... We're just walking. I'm not...
For some reason, he can't explain the heat that is rising in his face, his hand going nervously to the back of his neck. Regulus stares back at him for the longest 30 seconds of James's life.
Okay then. Goodbye, Potter.
He watches Regulus walk away, almost thinks he's going to let him.
Hey, Regulus.
The younger boy stops, but it takes him a while before he turns around. That look of resignation back on his face. He doesn't say anything, just watches James expectantly.
What was Snape on about?
He pushes away the nagging feeling in his stomach that insists he already knows, because it can't be that. It can't. Not here. Snape is a prick, but he's not... He can't be. Regulus's eyes widen slightly, and he suddenly looks startlingly young. James almost wants to take it back, if it's going to make Regulus look at him like that. The other boy opens and closes his mouth several times, but nothing comes out. Eventually he sighs, grey eyes full of something like pity.
You really should get out of here, James.
He turns around again and doesn't stop. James might have been able to protest, might have been able to demand an actual answer, except that his ears are ringing with that last word. James. James. And the way it makes something warm bloom inside him.
Where the hell have you been?
It's 10 minutes later when he makes it back up to the dorm room.
We're almost late.
He whips the invisibility cloak at James, who fumbles it.
Sorry, ran into Snape and his lot.
The three of them climb under the cloak, Peter already a rat, riding on Sirius's shoulder.
They ambush you?
Nah, other way round. Found them picking on some kid.
The guilt is instant. He doesn't lie to Sirius. Not really. He's not even sure why he's doing it now.
Wankers. We'll have to organise a little payback, huh? Take them down a few pegs.
James nods as they slip out of the common room and into the hall.
Definitely.
It's a seamless walk back to the shack. They've done it so many times by now they're old hats. They know which stairs to take, what halls to avoid, what time Pomfrey leaves, which is never soon enough in James's opinion. Once they nearly ran into her in the tunnel and it was a fucking disaster.
Hey, Moons.
They whip off the cloak in the shack's upstairs bedroom.
Hey, Pads. Ugh.
Remus is sitting on a dirty mattress, head between his knees, breathing too fast. He doesn't look at them. Sirius kneels next to him, carefully rubbing his back while Peter scurries onto his lap.
You lot are ridiculous, you know that?
We've been told.
James stashes the cloak before he joins his friends.
It's bad tonight. I don't know why it's so bad tonight. Fuck.
Sirius looks at James, his eyes tight.
We're here, Mooney. We'll be here the whole time.
Remus nods in a jerky movement, visibly shaking now.
You should change.
James gets to his feet, Peter scurrying off of Remus to come stand by him, but Sirius is reluctant to move, continuing to rub comforting circles on Remus's back until the screaming starts. That's always the hardest part for James. Remus's voice tries to tear itself apart as he convulses on the bed, skin beginning to split open. His thoughts change slightly when he's a stag. They become more simple. He sees and hears and tastes the world differently, new senses filtering into his brain in a way that is distinctly not human. The first thing his stag brain thinks when Remus is fully transformed is wrong, wrong. Something is wrong. He doesn't know what it is. The wolf is on edge, tense and twitchy. It doesn't follow them as willingly out of the house as it usually does, a low growling emanating from its chest the whole time. It makes James nervous, his pulse beating in time with his thoughts. Wrong, wrong, wrong. They're barely past the tree line when it lunges, claws out, teeth bared. Padfoot only just dodges it, scrambling away in surprise. They play with the wolf all the time, tackling one another, sometimes nipping each other on the shoulder or ear, but this is different. Wrong. 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 The wolf makes another attempt, but this time James is there, stepping between the pair and pushing the wolf back, pounding his hooves into the dirt. The wolf glares at him, so James tilts his head down, threatening his antlers. He's not going to use them, he couldn't, but the wolf doesn't need to know that. After a few more seconds of glaring at one another, Mooney skulks off, running deeper into the forest. He's angry. Why is he angry? Padfoot comes up beside him, Peter making figure eights as he runs around their legs, letting out little nervous squeaks. After a few minutes he swears he hears Padfoot huff and then he starts off after Mooney. James follows, making sure to keep close to him. Padfoot goes bounding into the water, face spreading into a grin, tongue hanging out. James joins him. Mooney lays down sulkily on the beach, but at least he seems calmer. It's a nice night, warm. The moon and stars so bright they're almost blinding. Mooney, apparently bored, gets back on his feet and takes off again into the forest. The rest of them are quick to follow, Padfoot shaking his fur dry in a move that is very reminiscent of his human form. They know the forest pretty well by now, but James still feels himself getting disoriented. Mooney is going deep. Too deep. Padfoot barks, trying to call him back. James can't see him anymore. It's too dark. The trees here too crowded. The three of them slow, turning around themselves. James tries to hear, to smell, but there's nothing. Wrong. 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 It happens so fast. 1 minute they're lost, and the next Mooney is coming through the trees. James has never felt afraid of him, not really, but this time, he goes right for Padfoot. The pair tumble to the ground a few feet away. A noise? James has never heard that before and his heart stops. He's barely thinking as he charges after them, Peter squealing behind him. One well-aimed kick gets Mooney off of him. It's too hard, he knows it is, but he's panicking. And Sirius doesn't get up. The wolf comes at them again. Except he isn't coming for them. He's coming for Padfoot. This time James rises up onto his hind legs and throws his front feet heavily into the wolf's chest, knocking him backwards and into one of the trees behind him. Fuck. Fuck. Remus. Fuck. James turns back to the dog. He doesn't know what to do. He can't turn back. Not yet. Not with Mooney right behind him. But he's fucking useless as a stag. He moves forward and sees the slow rise and fall of the dog's chest. And the blood, catching in the moonlight. He nudges him as gently as he can, Peter running mad laps around him. Padfoot groans and then, slowly, pulls himself up. James almost cries, though he's not sure what that would look like as a stag. He needs to know if Sirius is okay, but there's no fucking way to ask, and then, as if he's heard James's thoughts, he comes forward and gives Prongs a lick. James laughs and it comes out as a heavy breath through his nose. They turn back towards Mooney, still sitting where he hit the ground, curled in on himself, licking his wounds. He growls when he notices them watching. There's a small tug at James's leg and he looks back down at Padfoot. The dog holds his gaze for a moment before nodding his head in the direction of the shack. He wants to go back. He's been hurt, and clearly Mooney is riled up for some reason. It makes sense, but James's chest still aches a little at the thought. They've never split up on a full moon before. He dips his head slowly so Padfoot knows he understands, and without pausing, the black dog slinks off into the woods, limping more than James is comfortable with. Part of him wants to follow, but it's too early, and he can't leave Mooney alone. So he tears his eyes away from the spot where Padfoot disappeared, and takes his place beside the wolf.
Shit, Sirius.
James slips out from under Remus's arm as they enter the bedroom in the shrieking shack. Sirius is sitting against the wall, the side of his shirt drenched in blood.
It's not as bad as it looks.
James picks up his wand and kneels beside him while Peter takes Remus's unconscious body the rest of the way to the mattress.
How is he?
James lifts up his shirt to get a better look at his injuries. James grimaces.
He's had easier nights. At least he's bleeding less than you.
He holds his wand over Sirius but pauses before he casts, catching his friend's eye.
I only know a pisky.
Well, go on then. See what it does.
James flicks his wand and watches as the 3 deep gashes across Sirius's side grow slightly smaller.
Shit.
He tries the spell again, only to accomplish even less.
Pisky. That's all I've got.
Here.
Peter comes up behind them, sweating from having carried Remus back to the shack. They hadn't been sure it was a good idea to bring the wolf around Sirius again, just in case. Peter nudges James out of the way before taking his place. Sirius raises his brow.
You know what you're doing, Pete?
He rolls his eyes.
I know at least as much as James.
Sirius smiles.
Fair enough.
Peter's face screws up in concentration as he raises his wand.
Ferula.
Bandages shoot out of his wand and wrap around Sirius's side, from under his arm to his hip.
Nice one.
James slaps Peter on the back.
Where'd you learn that?
Remus course.
He's clearly trying to hide how pleased he is to get James's praise.
Where do I learn anything?
As if on cue, Remus groans, drawing all their attention back to him.
How long do you reckon we have until Pomfrey gets here?
Sirius pulls his bloody shirt back down. James is already across the room. Pete's thrown an old blanket across Remus's body, but James pulls it back to get a good look at his chest. It's already turning blue, bruised all down the front.
Hey, Peter. Remus teach you any more of those nifty healing spells?
Peter comes to hover over his shoulder, staring down bleakly at their friend and shaking his head. James drops the blanket just as Remus's eyes start to flutter open. Remus struggles at first, and James places a steady hand on his shoulder to keep him from falling onto the floor.
Easy, easy.
Remus's eyes are wide and frantic. There's a moment of calm when he finds James, but it barely lasts before his eyes are travelling down to the blood on his hands.
What?
But he winces when he tries to speak, his chest hitching, causing a new wave of guilt to wash over James.
Sorry, you were a little...
He doesn't know how to explain in a way that won't make Remus feel worse.
Angry.
Peter supplies from behind them. As good a description as any, James supposes. Somehow Remus's eyes grow wider.
Did I hurt you, Padfoot?
I'm here.
Sirius pops up, without giving any hint that his entire left side has been mauled. James almost laughs when he sees that Sirius has wrapped the invisibility cloak around his shoulders, hiding his bloody torso. Thank Merlin. Remus nods, eyes bright with tears.
You okay?
And James doesn't know if the question is directed at all of them, or just Sirius. Doesn't know if Remus remembers any of what happened. He usually doesn't. Either way, Sirius smiles. Bless him.
We're okay, Mooney.
Before any more can pass between them, there's the distinct noise of a door opening.
Shit.
James gets to his feet, as Peter quickly shrinks back into a rat.
We'll see you soon, alright, Remus?
Sirius lets him under the cloak. It doesn't escape his notice that Remus's eyes are trained on his bloody hands until the moment they disappear. They're quiet when they get back to the room, the dim blue light of the early morning filling up the space. James chucks the invisibility cloak into the corner and heads straight for the bathroom. He tries not to think about what he's washing away as the pink water swirls down the drain. When he walks back into the room, Sirius is inspecting his wounds in front of the mirror. Peter is face down on his bed. James pauses, breath hitching again at the sight of Sirius's bloody side, at the knowledge that it could have been so much worse. Sirius's eyes meet his and he tries to keep his expression blank.
You gonna be able to get those bandages back on?
Peter will do me again, won't you, Pete?
James sits on the end of his own bed. He considers lying down, but he knows if he does, he won't be able to get back up again.
How long do we have until breakfast?
He's too lazy to check himself.
Not long. 15 tops.
Sirius starts looking around for a new shirt. Much to Remus's dismay, Sirius has never learned how to use a wardrobe. James's eyes find his bloody clothes thrown over his headboard.
Oi, get rid of those before Mooney comes back.
Sirius pulls a clean jumper over his head. Well, relatively clean.
I'm not an idiot, you know.
He walks towards his bed, tying his hair back. James is too tired to snap back, dropping his head into his hands and wondering how many points McGonagall will dock him if he skivs off Transfigurations this morning.
He was so angry.
It's the tone that makes James look up. Sirius has suddenly gone quiet, standing at the head of his bed with the bloody shirt between his hands.
I don't know what I did.
His throat feels tight.
We don't... It could have been random.
But for some reason he can't quite make himself believe it.
Dunno.
Peter has flipped himself onto his back.
Felt pretty Padfoot focused, didn't it?
James glares at him.
Yes, thanks, Pete. Real helpful.
He's right, though.
Sirius stops them before the two can stop bickering. He's still looking down at the shirt in his hands.
Fuck, I really don't know what I did.
None of them speak for a while. James watches Sirius nervously, foot tapping against the ground. He really needs to fucking fly, just to get rid of the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He keeps hearing it. Keeps feeling the way his breath stuttered. He'd thought, for a second there, he'd really thought...
Come on.
He forces himself to get up, pushing to his feet. His whole body protests, begging him to lie down.
Let's go before the Great Hall gets too crowded.
Peter slides reluctantly off his bed and makes for the door, but Sirius doesn't move.
Hey.
James steps closer and squeezes Sirius's shoulder.
Don't worry about it too much, yeah? Moons loves you.
He sees the muscles in Sirius's jaw tense before he breathes out, nodding his head.
Yeah.
He incendios the shirt in his hands so quickly that by the time James realises what's happened, Sirius is already out the door. The Marauders have been sneaking breakfast up to the hospital wing every morning after the full moon since about halfway through first year, before they even fully understood what was going on. At first they would come in under the invisibility cloak, but they gave up on that pretty quick. They never could keep quiet once they were all together, and it was a while before any of them could cast a Muffaliado strong enough to make a difference. Pomfrey's just accepted it at this point. Secretly, James thinks she's glad that Remus isn't alone. She's not nearly as scary as she pretends to be.
Morning, Poppy!
Sirius has 2 levitating plates stacked high with breakfast carnage following him into the hospital wing.
Mr. Black, quiet if you please, he hasn't gotten up yet.
The large room is empty except for one bed with the curtains drawn around it. Sirius sends James a nervous look over his shoulder. That's unusual. Remus is usually itching to get to class by now.
How is he?
What's wrong with Remus is another thing that has become quietly accepted between them. Technically, she doesn't know that they know, but, well, she's not an idiot. Her face is grim.
He's in bad shape. The worst it's been in a while. Few fractured ribs, cracked clavicle, bad bruising.
James flinches, vividly remembering the feel of the wolf under his feet.
How long until he gets out?
At least not until tonight. I'd like to keep him until tomorrow morning, but I think he might bite my head off if I suggest it.
There's a beat of silence before she breaks it by nodding towards his bed.
Go on. See if you can get him to eat something. But be gentle with him this morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Sirius gives her a salute, but the grin on his face feels forced. James is only a little surprised when they pull back the curtain and find Remus sitting upright in bed, an expectant look on his face. Clearly, he'd been waiting for them, no doubt pretending to be asleep so Pomfrey wouldn't fuss. He looks pale and young in his blue pyjamas. There are dark rings under his eyes and new scrapes across his face.
Hey, Remus.
Peter pulls up a chair. James does the same on the other side while Sirius sits at the foot of the bed.
Got all your favourites?
Sirius lowers the plate onto Remus's lap, but he barely looks at it.
I'm not hungry.
He passes it off onto the bedside table. The 3 of them exchange a quick glance.
Come on, Remus.
Peter nudges him, gripping his own plate a little too tightly.
Not even the bacon?
Remus only shakes his head. The gesture is sharp, pointed. He turns to James.
What happened?
James looks back at him and then down at his plate, pushing his eggs around for a moment just to buy him some time.
Nothing, really.
James grimaces, forcing himself to look up again.
Well...
He swallows, his throat suddenly feeling like sandpaper.
I'm not really sure, to be honest.
Your hands.
Remus's eyes are the size of James's plate.
Your hands were covered in blood. So I need you to tell me what happened. I need you to tell me the truth, and I need you to tell me now.
There is no arguing with that tone of voice. James nods, exhaling tightly.
Yeah, okay, Mooney.
He puts his own breakfast aside, running a hand through his hair, a nervous tick.
Listen, it's like Pete said. You got a bit angry.
Remus visibly swallows.
Angry? You said I didn't hurt you.
You didn't.
He can't think of any way to make this better, to keep Remus from bleeding over this. His eyes flick nervously to Sirius and then back. That's enough for Remus, though. He should have known better. Remus whips his head around, somehow growing paler.
I hurt you.
Sirius smiles. Too big and too bright, but God, James loves him for trying.
Barely. No offense, Mooney, but you're a bit of a shit werewolf.
To be fair, he does have a disadvantage.
Sirius arches his brow.
How'd you figure that?
Hard to be afraid of a bloke once you know how he folds his pants.
Quite right.
I hurt you?
Remus's voice cuts through the room like a sharp knife, all brevity sucked out of the air. The look of horror hasn't left his face, his eyes wide and demanding.
Moons. I'm alright, look.
He spreads his arms out wide, managing a grin.
But
the words don't quite make it out of Remus's mouth. He opens it and closes it several times before giving up. James can see the small hitches in his shoulders, like his breath is getting caught in his throat. It reminds him of the way he gets before his skin splits open and the wolf slides out.
Hey.
Sirius moves so that he's right in front of him, hands on his shoulders.
Remus, look at me, okay? Breathe with me. In and out. In. 1, 2, 3. Out. 1, 2, 3. Come on, Moons.
His eyes are intent, never wavering.
With me, okay? In. 1, 2, 3. And out. 1, 2, 3. You alright?
Sirius breaks them out of whatever trance they've fallen into, hands still on Remus's shoulders. Remus nods.
Fuck, Sirius, I'm so sorry, I don't...
Hey.
Sirius holds up one of his hands to stop him.
You don't have to apologise. Really, I mean it. Cross my heart and hope James dies.
Oi!
Sirius smirks at him over Remus's head.
Okay.
But Remus doesn't answer right away, and James sees his hands fisted in the sheets, nails digging into his palms.
Sirius.
I mean it. I'm fine. Aren't I, Prongs?
Bit of a prat, but other than that, yeah, tip-top.
James grins in a way that he hopes betrays none of the anxiety still swirling in his chest.
See? Peter agrees too, don't you, Pete?
Peter nods vigorously.
Yep. Definitely a prat.
Sirius reaches over to swat his head, but Peter is too fast as he ducks out of the way. Remus is shaking his head, scrubbing at his face with his hands.
You're all idiots.
Can't argue with that.
It is a very accurate assessment.
Remus drops his hands, and his eyes are dry.
Okay.
Sirius arches his brow.
Okay.
Remus just nods, looking incredibly tired as he drops back against his pillows.
Excellent.
Sirius beams, overly bright, trying too hard. James hopes that Remus is too tired to notice, but he doubts it.
Now, can we get back to breakfast?
I'm really not.
The plate of food has already been levitated from the bedside table back to Remus's lap. He rolls his eyes but doesn't bother fighting it, picking rather unenthusiastically at a piece of toast. The pause in conversation allows James to realise how tired he is, nearly choking on his eggs as he tries to swallow and yawn at the same time. Judging by the light coming in through the windows, they haven't got much time before Transfiguration, and James thinks about skipping again.
Do you reckon it was maybe because of our little tiff in the dorm room?
He isn't looking at them, eyes very determinedly on his breakfast. James groans internally. He really wants to do this now? Now? They only just managed to get Remus to let up on himself.
Do I... What?
Remus drops the piece of bacon that had been on its way to his mouth. Sirius shrugs, chewing thoughtfully.
I just wondered, if maybe you were hacked off at me in Mooney form because you were hacked off at me in Remus form.
Remus blinks and James fights the urge to smack the back of Sirius's head.
I'm not mad at you, Sirius.
But you were a bit, yeah? About me being too protective or whatever.
He waves his hands about flippantly.
I just wonder if that's why Mooney was pissed at me too.
Something flickers across Remus's face for just a second before he shuts it down. He's good at that, bottling things up. James probably would have missed it, except he'd seen it before, in the common room, before they'd walked down to the hospital wing, like he was in pain. It takes James's brain a second.
Yeah, maybe.
You reckon?
Remus nods.
Yeah, must be. But I wasn't really...
James looks between his two friends. Remus sighs, pinching the bridge of his nose.
What I'm trying to say is I'm not mad. Not anymore, okay?
Sirius grins.
Good. That's good.
It makes sense. James thinks pityingly as he watches his friend turn back to his breakfast, unsure of how he didn't see it before. Of course Remus was angry. He fancies Mary. James feels like he knows what muggles mean when they say the word magic. They don't mean spells, or wands, or cauldrons. Well, okay, yes, sometimes they do. But in those moments when the word slips out of them, all quiet and reverent, like they can't help it, that's something different. James knows that because it's how he feels when he's flying. Magic. The sun is only just rising above the horizon, and even in his leather playing gloves, James's hands are still half frozen to his broom. The warm dawn light reaches across the great lake towards him like fingers, the air crisp and sweet, the way it only gets in autumn.
Motherfucker!
James misses the rest of the curse as he snatches the quaffle out of Macdonald's hands and zips off down the pitch towards the opposite goal. Prewett and Abbott put up a good defence, but James is in top form this morning. They can barely touch him. He grins as he watches the ball sail through the middle hoop, out of breath in the best way.
You're a junkie. You know that.
James pulls his broom around to meet Sirius, who's floated up lazily behind him, beat his club across his shoulders, arm resting on top like he can't be bothered.
Please, you love it as much as I do.
James tries and fails to push the sweaty hair out of his face.
Not at 7 in the morning, I don't. We don't even have anyone to impress.
He nods cheekily towards the empty stands. James rolls his eyes.
Like you aren't showing off for Macdonald.
I'll have you know, Mary and Molly's relationship has far surpassed such childish games.
Uh-huh.
Sirius smirks.
Don't worry, Jamie. One day you'll meet a girl with eyesight as bad as yours, and then you'll know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
He reaches across to punch Sirius's shoulder, but the prat swerves out of the way.
For your information, there are plenty of girls.
Stop flirting and get your asses down here.
They both peer over their brooms at the ground, where a very small and very angry-looking Frank Longbottom is glaring up at them. Well, they assume he's glaring. The details of his face are a little blurry at this height.
You think he wants us to go down there?
Hard to tell. He's not being very clear.
So obtuse, our Frank.
Always speaking in riddles.
Though, it does appear that everyone else has gone.
And if they all jumped off a cliff, would you do it too?
Might.
He shrugs.
Depends on the day, really.
I will kick you both off this team, so help me God.
That really can't be good for him.
And he has such a lovely singing voice. I suppose we could go down.
Well, for his sake.
James nods in agreement, meeting Sirius's eye and grinning. Frank makes a point of not looking or speaking to either of them when they finally land down on the field, choosing instead to aggressively gather the rest of the straying team back together.
Prewett!
Just call me Alice, Frank. Honestly, we've been dating for 2 years.
Not on the pitch, Prewett.
Alice arches her brow.
If memory serves, we were dating on the pitch last Friday night.
Sirius gets a glare from a very red-faced Frank.
Fine. Alice?
She smiles brightly at him.
Your defense is weak. You and Abbott are leaving the center wide open. Stop making the first move. You gotta play hard to get with your chasers. And communicate with each other.
Aye, aye, Captain. No more fucking the chasers on the first date.
Frank looks in danger of exploding.
God. I think I'm in love.
She's taken, Black.
Frank runs a hand over his very flustered face.
Just don't even think about it.
Alice winks at Sirius across the circle, causing him to fake swoon into James's arms.
Macdonald?
Frank redirects his focus, very determinedly not looking at either Sirius or Alice.
You gotta make sure not to get too cocky, right? You thought you were home free, you stopped watching your sides. Potter snatched that quaffle out of you practically mid-goal.
Yeah, I'd like to see him try it when I'm not half asleep on my broom.
Name the time and place, Macdonald.
James grins, earning him a rude gesture in return.
McKinnon, Black, that was a good practice, but Sirius...
Oh, he gets a first name.
Yeah, well, you should have seen the things we did on the pitch last Friday.
Sirius waggles his eyebrows suggestively, and Alice looks like someone's just told her it's Christmas morning.
Enough.
Frank holds his hands out like he can shove the innuendos back down their throats. The pair of them are far too pleased with themselves.
Black, don't drop your club. I want you in prepared position at all times, understood?
Got it, Captain. No more fucking the chasers on the first date.
He winks at Mary. Frank truly looks like he's on the verge of some kind of breakdown.
Oh, forget it. I give up. You lot are a bunch of heathens.
Oh, but Frank, we're your heathens.
Frank gives Marlene a flat stare.
Get out of here, all of you, but be back tomorrow and be on bloody time.
This last comment is directed specifically at Sirius, who gives him a salute as James pulls him towards the change rooms before he can get himself murdered. 20 minutes and several towel whippings later, James and Sirius are making their way back up to the castle. Mary and Marlene promising to catch up with them later. They always take ages getting ready after practice. Not that Sirius is much better. James reckons he'd still be standing in front of the mirror, coifing his hair if it weren't for him. James's stomach lets out a particularly obscene growl.
Merlin, did you swallow a wild animal or something?
Listen, it's not my fault Frank has us running drills before the house elves are up.
I'm sorry, is James Fleamont Potter actually complaining about Quidditch practice?
No, but I am saying we need to remember to raid the kitchens tonight, so I can have some fuel in the morning.
Fuel? Did you just call food fuel? Mate, you've been spending too much time with Frank, you little Quidditch psycho.
Oh, shut it.
James knocks his shoulder into Sirius as they walk into the still sleepy castle.
Listen, I'll catch up with you, yeah?
Sirius claps him on the back as he starts to pull away.
Catch up with me? What are you ditching me to shag Macdonald already? It's not even noon.
Sirius grins.
I want you to know that if Mary was up for it, I 100% would do that.
No bloody loyalty.
James is only half joking if he's honest.
But, as it happens, I'm actually posting a letter.
That catches James's attention. With all the Marauders at Hogwarts and Sirius's family being, well, his family, Sirius doesn't get much post.
Oh?
James is desperate to pry, but doing his best not to. Sirius rolls his eyes, still smiling.
It's to my uncle, you nosy bugger.
That clarifies exactly nothing, and Sirius must realise it because after a brief pause he pushes on, a little more serious now.
My uncle Alfred. He wrote me first week back. I guess he heard through the family gossip network about my, departure.
James nods slowly, not entirely clear on what kind of story this is going to turn out to be. Besides, years of knowing Sirius have taught him when to push and when to wait.
I've only met him a few times. Nice guy, quiet.
His fingers are fiddling with the sleeves of his robes.
Anyway, he said he wanted to reach out, make sure I was okay. He said he was proud of me.
Sirius ducks his head a bit, embarrassed. He can boast and brag all day, but give him a genuine compliment and he has no idea how to handle it.
That's nice and unexpected.
Sirius's hand rubs the back of his neck.
Yeah, tell me about it. Anyway, I've kind of been writing to him a bit. Well, not that I minded cutting them off. I didn't.
I know.
His friend nods, expression thoughtful, eyes not quite meeting James's stare.
But it's comforting, I guess, knowing not every member of my family wants me dead.
James offers him a weak smile.
That's good, Pats. I'm happy for you.
Sirius looks up finally.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. He's got wicked taste in music too, for an old man. Says he's going to send me some Muggle records.
James arches his brow.
Your uncle listens to Muggle music.
Right? What a trip. I think he's secretly a bit of a rebel.
No shit.
There's a moment of awkward silence before Sirius nods, seemingly to himself.
Well, I'm gonna...
He starts walking away backwards, gesturing in the direction of the owlery.
Yeah, right. See you later then.
He watches his best friend disappear up the stairs, feeling a little dazed by the whole conversation. He's happy for Sirius, he is, but he's also worried. The Blacks are, well, unpredictable at the best of times. And Sirius barely even knows this guy. What if he turns out to be as bad as the rest of them? What if he's worse? They're not all bad, says the annoying voice in the back of his head. Regulus is. He stops that thought in its tracks, a little irritated with himself for having it in the first place. One moderately okay conversation doesn't change anything. Doesn't all of a sudden make Regulus a good person. But what did he do to make you think he was so bad in the first place? That's it. James has had enough of talking to himself. He does not have to engage with the stupid thoughts in his stupid head if he doesn't want to. He starts walking determinedly in the direction of the Great Hall. After all, nothing shuts up introspection quite like food.
Jesus, do they have to?
James looks up, first at Mooney, who is currently staring down at the parchment in front of him like it just insulted his mother, and then over at the stacks where Sirius is devouring Mary's face. James squints, tilting his head slightly.
You think they can breathe like that?
James looks back at his friend pityingly. Typical of Sirius to go for the bird Remus fancies and then insist on snogging her in front of him on a near daily basis.
Listen, Mooney.
He checks to make sure there's no one around.
If you just tell Sirius that, if you tell him how you feel.
What did you just say?
Remus's eyes are big with the kind of fear that usually only makes an appearance around the full moon.
Whoa, calm down. It's not a big deal.
For whatever reason, this does not seem to help matters.
I was just saying, I just think, if you tell him, the truth, he'll quit shoving it down your throat.
He knows that Remus is a private person, but this seems... I mean, James knows he's a bloody werewolf, for fuck's sake. Why is he getting so jumpy about a crush?
He won't mind, Moons, honestly. It's not like you can help it. Besides, Pads and Mary are about the two most casual people I know. It's not like this means you're never going to get a chance to shoot your shot.
James trails off as it becomes apparent that nothing he is saying is doing anything to dampen the fear in Remus's eyes.
How do you know?
James blinks, thoroughly regretting this entire conversation.
I don't know, just the way you looked. In the common room.
In the common room?
Yeah, on the full moon.
Remus winces. That night is still a sore subject. Remus has mentioned once or twice that he thinks the Marauders should sit out the next one, just to be safe. This idea has been unanimously shot down, of course.
Remus, it's really not.
James. Please don't tell him.
He won't.
James, I'm asking you as my friend, or just please.
It hurts. Remus's voice hurts, and James has no idea why. This isn't at all how he thought this conversation would go. Part of him aches that this is how Remus feels about this. How Remus feels full stop. In the dark, on his own, always hiding. And he wants him to know that he doesn't have to. That he's been told his whole life to keep things behind closed doors, but it doesn't have to be that way. But Remus just keeps looking at him like he's getting ready to bolt, and even James has the good sense to know that this is not the time for that conversation.
Yeah, Remus. I promise. Of course.
Thank you.
He doesn't look at James. Instead, he starts packing up his books.
Hey, wait, Moons. You don't have to...
It's fine.
Remus stuffs parchment messily into the canvas bag over his shoulder.
I'm just... tired.
He turns away, nearly bulldozing into Marlene in his rush to escape. James leans back in his chair and passes a hand over his face.
Oh, fuck.
He was sure in a rush.
Marlene slides into Mooney's now vacant seat across from him.
Yeah.
James shoots a weary look at the door.
It's possible I just said the wrong thing.
What? You? James Potter? The King of Tact?
Ha ha ha, hilarious.
Marlene smiles.
I am, thanks for noticing.
James drops his gaze back down to his runes homework. He feels he ought to go after Mooney, but he's not entirely sure that he knows how to make this better, or even that he knows what happened in the first place.
Gosh, they're really going at it, aren't they?
James looks up,
What? Oh.
He follows her gaze to the still very much entangled Mary and Sirius.
Yeah, well, you know them. Are they really here if no one's watching?
True.
Her gaze comes back to him and it looks like all kinds of trouble.
Speaking of embarrassing displays of affection...
Is that what we were talking about?
I've noticed you've quit making a spectacle of yourself in front of Lily recently.
James scowls at her across the table.
I wish people would stop bringing that up. It's not a big deal.
It's kind of a big deal.
Besides, it's no one's business.
Oh, come on, James. You've made it everyone's business.
Have not.
She sends him a flat look, but he doesn't budge, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms over his chest.
Really? What about that time in 3rd year when you charmed all the pumpkins at the Halloween feast to sing love ballads to her?
That was... Okay, maybe that one was a little public. But I only did it once.
She raises a disbelieving eyebrow.
There was also 2nd year when you made a pink cloud follow her around all Valentine's Day raining petals.
Well...
And last year when you filled the Gryffindor common room with about 1,000 lilies before serenading her in front of everyone.
James bites down on the inside of his cheek as he feels the heat rising in his face.
Or in...
Yes, okay, I get it, thank you.
James shoves an aggravated hand through his hair. Marlene looks at him smugly from across the table.
I was right, Git.
Yeah. She nods, too amused for James's liking.
You were.
I'm trying to be... better.
That's good.
A moment passes before she leans forward across the table.
So who is she then?
James blinks.
Who's who?
Marlene rolls her eyes.
The girl? That's distracted you from Lily?
James is genuinely at a loss for words, which rarely happens. He splutters for a moment, gawking at her.
There's no girl. I mean, there have been girls, obviously.
Obviously.
James chooses to ignore her.
But there's no other girl.
He collapses a little.
Just Evans. Always has been.
Marlene eyes him curiously for a minute before shaking her head.
I don't buy it.
Don't buy what?
She waves her hand.
You, James Potter, are romantic. There is no way you would just give up on Lily without someone else to expend your wooing energy on.
Okay, first off, who said anything about giving up on Lily? I have not given up. Secondly, wooing energy. Really, McKinnon?
It's a nice sound, Marlene's laugh. Bright and warm. The kind that makes you feel like you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
Alright, not my best. But the point still stands.
James looks at her flatly.
Oh, sorry. You had a point.
But the mischievous look hasn't left her eyes.
I'll figure it out, you know.
Yeah, well, when you do, let me know. I'd really like to be aware of who I'm wooing.
She opens her mouth to speak when another voice cuts her off.
Ma?
James feels his heart flip. He always does when she's close. Has since he was 11. You'd think he'd get used to it at some point, or build up some kind of immunity. But it's always the same. Always feels like the first time. Like he's never going to remember how to breathe again.
Ready to go?
Lily stops beside Marlene's chair, barely looking at James. Which is okay. Completely fine. James bites down on his tongue and forces himself to turn back to his homework, holding in the numerous, desperate and embarrassing things he wants to say. Like, you're beautiful. So beautiful I can't stand it. You make me feel too big for my skin. Like staring into the sun. You're melting my wings.
And how are you, Potter?
He has no desire to see what Marlene's expression is
Potter?
doing right now. Some mate she is. Couldn't even give him a heads up that she was waiting for Lily.
Potter.
James blinks at the sound of his name being spoken by Lily's voice. Carefully, he looks up.
She asked you how you are, James.
Oh. I'm doing runes readings.
Marlene looks like holding in her laughter is physically painful, while Lily just looks confused.
Right. Marlene, should we go?
What about how... Fuck. I mean... Alright, Evans.
The confusion on Lily's face does not dissipate, and James prays to the soul of Godric Gryffindor for the floor to open up and swallow him whole.
I'm fine.
Lily sends a pointed look at Marlene.
Let's go.
Marlene nods, shoulders shaking with laughter.
So you're at practice, James?
James does his best to channel Sirius when he glares back at her.
Yup. You sure will.
She, at least, has the good grace to look frightened by that. He watches them leave. Pathetically. He watches Lily's hair, so long now it's nearly past her waist. Watches the way her mouth flicks into a sharp grin, her eyes bright and trained on Marlene, giving her the attention James would kill for.
What's his problem anyway?
He hasn't been sleeping well since the full moon. He closes his eyes and he's back in the forest. He can't see, but he hears. He fumbles around in the dark until his hands touch something warm and sticky that smells like iron. Then he wakes up. Every time he feels like something in his chest is caving in. His hands and legs shaking as he resists the urge to rip back the curtains around Sirius's bed and make sure he's okay. Make sure Mooney didn't turn him inside out. That he got there in time. It's stupid. He's too old for nightmares. With a huff, James turns onto his side, the steady breathing of his roommates letting him know they're all asleep. He punches his pillow, lays back down, and stares up at the canopy over his head. He counts centaurs like he used to when he was little. He recites the ingredients to the Alahosty draught they learned in potions this week. He imagines he's flying. None of it works. Eventually he gives up, pulling his legs over the side of the bed and scrubbing at his face. He could go down to the common room and try to get some work done, or maybe sneak into the kitchens. They ward off the Quidditch pitch after curfew. James reaches carefully into the drawer of his bedside table and pulls out the map.
I solemnly swear that I'm not...
Maybe once he figures out where Filch is patrolling, he'll have a better idea of what to do. Except Filch's name isn't the one that catches his eye. The map unfolds on his lap and almost instantly he sees it, all alone in the astronomy tower. Regulus Black. James blinks, double-checking that he isn't making it up.
Nutter.
He doesn't take his eyes off the name. He's probably up there yelling at the sky again, though why he's doing it at 2:30 in the morning James can't fathom. A few more minutes pass before he sighs.
Fuck it. Mischief managed.
He shoves his feet into his trainers, not bothering with the invisibility cloak, as he throws a grey jumper over his bare torso. He checks the map periodically as he moves through the halls, but Filch is on the other side of the castle and Mrs. Norris appears to be outside doing who knows what. He takes the stairs to the top of the astronomy tower 2 at a time, tapping the map closed when he reaches the door at the top. For a second he wavers, wondering if this is really the best idea. But then that's never stopped him before. He shoves the map into the waistband of his trousers and gently opens the door. Regulus is standing in front of his telescope just like he was the last time, engrossed enough that he somehow doesn't hear the door. Alistair Moody invades James's thoughts long enough to shout "Constant vigilance!" at the back of Regulus's head. He bites the inside of his mouth to keep from laughing. Unlike James, Regulus is not in his pyjamas, but instead a pair of formal-looking trousers and a button-down, his robes discarded in a pile by his feet. James leans back against the wall behind him and watches as Regulus's fingers meticulously work the knobs of the lens.
Okay, I give up. What are you doing?
Regulus whips around, drawing his wand without a second thought and pointing it right at the centre of James's chest. Maybe him and Moody would get along after all. James raises his hands in surrender.
On edge much?
Regulus only glares.
What the fuck are you doing here?
Couldn't sleep.
So you came to the astronomy tower?
You sound awfully judgy for someone who is also here.
The glaring intensifies. James nods at Regulus's wand.
You going to lower that thing?
Haven't decided.
Well, let me know when you do, yeah?
James steps around him and up to the neglected telescope, completely ignoring Regulus's raised wand. He bends down, shutting one of his eyes and peering through the lens. A grouping of stars blink back at him. For some reason he thought he would understand better once he saw what Regulus was looking at. But he doesn't. He's always been crap at astronomy.
Bit late for stargazing, innit?
Regulus is still standing behind him, tense and sharp-looking, but his wand has been put away, so James counts that as a win. He really didn't fancy getting hexed tonight.
I'm sorry. Is there something I can help you with?
James can't help but remembering himself saying those words not long ago in a cramped train compartment.
Not really.
He tries to shrug off the weird feeling that memory twists in his gut.
Told you. Can't sleep.
He moves towards the railing, sitting down on the ledge and facing Regulus.
So, what's with the telescope?
He can see Regulus grinding his teeth, hands and fists at his sides.
Listen, Potter. I'm not sure if our little conversation the other day gave you the wrong impression, but you and I are not friends.
James leans back, draping his arms over the railing.
Never said we were.
Then what?
He waves his hand pointedly in James's direction.
Are you doing?
James arches his brow, holding back a smirk.
Pretty sure I asked you first.
Regulus just stares at him for a solid minute before shaking his head.
God, you're just like him, you know that? Fucking arrogant assholes.
Whoa.
James can only assume that the he being referred to is Sirius.
All I did was ask what you were up to.
No, you came out here into my space.
Pretty sure this is public property.
And decided that you have the right to pry.
I didn't realise astronomy was such a touchy subject for you.
James half expects Regulus to reach for his wand again.
You don't just get to go around doing whatever you like, taking whatever you like. You don't have a right to everything just because you're James bloody Potter.
James blinks, watching as Regulus's chest heaves under his shirt. He's sitting up straight again, taking Regulus in properly. He looks tired.
Okay.
Regulus stares at him.
Okay.
James nods.
You're right. I don't have a right to everything.
The younger boy continues to eye him wearily, like he's waiting for the punchline. When none comes, he seems to deflate, and after another prolonged stretch of silence that has James itching to move, he walks over and sits next to him on the ledge.
Sorry.
He stares ahead the whole time, not looking at James once.
It's been a bad day.
James's eyes run him over, his shoulders pulled too far back, hands clutching at his knees.
Reg has it.
Oh, don't you dare. Regulus was bad enough. Let's not be so gauche as to resort to nicknames.
James has to bite the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing. There is something mildly charming about the way that he embraces his posh accent. James, on the other hand, has spent years meticulously trying to train the good breeding out of his voice.
Has it occurred to you that I'm not actually trying to take anything from you?
No.
James finds he's actually startled by that.
Why?
There's a moment of silence before Regulus finally turns to face him.
Isn't that what people do? Isn't that what we do?
We?
James feels a little off kilter. Regulus must see it because he rolls his eyes.
Not us specifically. I meant yours and mine, our sides.
I'm not on anyone's side.
It's such an automatic response. James doesn't even think about it, but once he hears the words out loud, he realises that they aren't true, that they can't be. Not anymore. Regulus gives him a piteous once-over.
You are such a child.
Oi! I'm older than you.
Yes. Pathetic, isn't it?
But there's the sliver of a smile somewhere in his mouth that takes the edge off. James likes it. Likes when he gets that armour to crack. It reminds him a bit of Remus, if he's honest. The way he was when they were younger. The way he still is sometimes.
Hey, Reg.
Regulus drops his face into his hands.
I swear to all that is holy, Potter, if you start calling me that in public, I will end you.
Noted.
Regulus waits a beat before dropping his hands and sending him a flat look.
Well, your inflection suggested there was a question to follow.
James nods, still smiling.
What are you doing up here at 2 a.m. with a telescope?
Is there something else I should be up here with?
A girl would make more sense.
Something flashes across Regulus's face that James can't quite catch, and all of a sudden he's looking away again.
Did you not listen to anything I said 5 minutes ago?
I did. You don't owe me an answer, but I want you to know that I'm asking because I'm interested, not because I want something to hold over your head.
That seems to surprise Regulus, though he does his best not to show it. James waits, which really, he thinks, is impressive. He's usually quite impatient, but there's something about Regulus, something delicate. And James finds himself wanting desperately not to break whatever it is that's keeping Regulus here. Still. next to him.
We're all there.
He's still not looking at James. He wants so badly to ask him to explain, but he doesn't. He keeps waiting.
Me. Sirius. My father. We're all there. Together. Holding up the night sky.
He shakes his head, picking apart his fingers in his lap.
I started coming up here in second year, when Sirius stopped talking to me. Up there we're still... whole. I don't know. It makes me think that maybe in a different time, a different world, there's an us that's still... there's a place that's not like this.
And because how does he respond to that? How does he even begin to hold all those feelings? He remembers third year. Remembers Sirius showing up to school covered in bruises he didn't yet know how to erase. He hadn't thought about Regulus, about whether or not he deserved to be lumped in with the rest of them, about whether or not he had his own bruises. Regulus buries the heels of his hands into his eyes.
Sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud.
Nah. No, it doesn't.
James is glad his voice doesn't sound as shaky as he feels.
He
swallows, picking through all the words in his mouth, trying to find the right ones.
I think Sirius does it too.
That causes Regulus to look back at him, those grey eyes bright in the moonlight.
I catch him sometimes, looking out the dorm window at night. I didn't really think about it before, but...
James doesn't know what to do. James doesn't know what to make of the expression on Regulus's face.
Course.
James smiles a bit.
You didn't hear that from me.
No, of course not.
They sit in silence, but it's not uncomfortable. Not the kind that makes your skin itch. And James almost misses it when Regulus starts to pull away.
I should go.
He gets to his feet.
Quidditch practice tomorrow.
James feels himself grin.
Big match against Hufflepuff coming up.
Regulus rolls his eyes, waving his wand and shrinking the telescope back down so that he can slip it into his pocket.
Hardly.
You ready?
James resists the sudden urge to pull Regulus back down beside him. Regulus sends him a sly look.
Always.
He's at the door, one hand on the handle, but he pauses, standing there for long enough that James starts to wonder if he's having some kind of stroke.
I'm not my brother.
Regulus's grey eyes dart up to meet James's. Surprised by the sudden change in topic, it takes James a minute to respond.
I know.
Just, if that's what...
His face scrunches in frustration as he attempts to get his thoughts in order.
If that's why you're doing this, if you think you can save me the way you did him, you should know that you can't.
James feels his thoughts go in a million different directions at those words, unsure of what to address first.
Do you need to be saved, Reg?
He isn't sure what he's expecting, but it's certainly not the sad smile that peeks out of the corner of Regulus's mouth.
Good night, Potter.
James watches the door close behind him. He's not sure how it starts exactly. It's an accident. He's almost certain. A coincidence. That he finds himself heading up to the astronomy tower almost every night after his friends have gone to sleep. Another coincidence? That Regulus is always there. It's strange how quickly he starts to know Regulus. The different ways he smiles without using his mouth. Or how he tugs at his fingers when he gets nervous. James doesn't know what it means that he notices these things. He doesn't try to figure it out. Maybe he doesn't want to.
You're telling me you've been at this school for 4 years?
James is lying on his back, arms thrown behind his head as a cushion.
And you've never stepped foot in the Forbidden Forest?
Excuse me for taking the forbidden part of the name seriously.
Regulus has one knee pulled up, chin resting on top.
Right little rule follower, aren't you?
I just happen to be in possession of something called common sense. You might want to try it.
Sounds dead boring.
Yes, well, you would think so.
James pushes himself up onto his elbows so that he can look at Regulus properly. He seems different like this. Curled up, shirt untucked. Soft, James' brain supplies. He looks soft.
I'll take you.
Regulus arches his brow.
You'll take me where?
The forest, obviously.
I'm not going in there.
Oh, come on.
James knocks his foot against Regulus's.
You'll love it, promise.
Somehow I doubt that.
Listen, if you're scared...
I'm not scared.
James does his best not to laugh.
I'm not scared. I'm smart. There's a difference.
You say so.
James knocks his foot again, this time staying there, pressed to Regulus's ankle.
But my point was that if you did happen to be scared...
James holds up his hand the minute he sees Regulus open his mouth.
Which you aren't, obviously. But if you were, you should know that you'd have a distinct advantage going in there with me.
And why is that?
Because Gryffindors are contractually obligated to sacrifice themselves. So, you'll have a decent head start while whatever terrible monster we run into feasts on my flesh.
Regulus drops his face into his knees, shoulders shaking with laughter. Making Regulus laugh is new. Good new. Really good new. It feels like scoring a goal in a Quidditch match. Like scoring the winning goal.
I can't believe you stole a snitch.
Regulus bats the ball in question away from his face. James smiles, catching it easily in his hand as it starts zooming over the edge of the tower.
Really? You can't believe it?
Regulus rolls his eyes, but James feels smug because he can tell he's trying not to smile.
Besides, not stealing, just borrowing.
Of course you are.
James tosses the snitch up and down a few times before he notices Regulus watching him. The younger boy quickly turns back to his telescope.
The Catapults are your favourite Quidditch team?
They're sitting on the ground, leaning against the castle. James's most recent haul from Honeydukes piled between them.
Don't know why you're so surprised.
James bites off the end of his jelly wand.
The Catapults.
James rolls his eyes.
They play like absolute badasses. There's a reason the award for riskiest play is named after one of their players.
Because he was eaten by a chimera. Not because he did anything particularly impressive on the pitch.
Correction.
James waves around his half-eaten gummy to emphasise his point.
He was eaten by a chimera, and he was impressive on the pitch. Can't ask for a better legacy than that.
Regulus stares blankly at him.
I can't tell if you're joking right now, or if you're genuinely this ridiculous.
James grins.
Part of my charm, that.
He's trying to collect them all?
Regulus passes over his chocolate frog card to James.
Yeah.
That's absurd.
Yup.
He slips the card into the pocket of his jumper.
But, gotta respect his commitment.
Regulus arches his brow in a manner that suggests he does not think that you actually do have to respect it, but he doesn't say anything. Instead he turns his head and stares out over the grounds, closing his eyes for a moment and breathing in.
Bad day.
Maybe. I don't know.
James watches him, waiting for him to keep going. He's learned in these moments that Regulus needs to feel like he's in control.
I got a letter from home.
James feels himself stiffen. They don't talk about his family. James isn't sure that he wants to, that he can.
It's my dad.
Regulus struggles to keep going.
He's sick.
What?
Regulus leans back against the pillar behind him, head tilted up towards the sky.
I thought Sirius might have told you.
He lets that hang there between them while James tries to collect himself.
No. No. No, he didn't say. Has your dad been sick a while?
Regulus nods, not dropping his eyes from the sky.
And the healers can't do anything.
James is learning to hate those. They're nothing like his real laugh, which is full and strong, a hand on your back.
No. Blood curse or something. Hereditary. Pure bloods. You know, all that inbreeding.
James did know. He had a vague memory of his mum telling him about an aunt who had died from something similar.
Does that mean...
Finally, Regulus's eyes come back to him.
That Sirius has it?
He shrugs.
We don't know. It won't. Not until it happens.
James feels a little lightheaded for a moment. Fingers digging into the stone building underneath him. The pain helps. It keeps him grounded. We figured out how to turn ourselves into animagi for Remus, he thinks to himself, trying to get his stomach muscles to unclench. We'll figure this out too if we have to. It takes a moment before he realises that Regulus is watching him, curious expression on his face.
You really care about him, don't you?
Yes. Not just him, though.
Regulus's expression flickers and then quickly goes out. He looks down at his lap, picking some lint off his trousers in a poor attempt to appear indifferent.
Anyway, it's hard hearing from him when I can't do anything to help.
James isn't sure what to say. He realizes suddenly that he doesn't know much about Mr. Black. Most of Sirius's stories center around Walburga, her rules and her bigotry and her sharp magic. Magic that liked to slice into him any chance it got, sometimes lashing out unconsciously, his mother's anger bleeding out of her and leaving him broken. If Sirius spoke of his father, it was as the shadowy figure in the background who said and did nothing.
He works at the ministry, right?
James pulls out the one piece of information he thinks he can remember.
He did, but he's gotten worse recently. He can't really use his magic anymore. Too bad, really. He used to be brilliant.
James recognizes that tone, knows that that's how he sounds when he talks about his own dad. He tries not to feel angry at Regulus, really he does, but he can't get the images of Sirius alone on his doorstep out of his head, or showing up to the Hogwarts Express every year held together by tape and glue.
They're nice to you?
Regulus doesn't seem surprised by the question.
I love them.
James bites back the automatic response of, how? And why? Because he knows they won't get him anywhere. Knows they'll just shut Regulus down.
That's not the same thing.
Regulus smiles dryly.
No. But it's the thing that matters.
James has started sleeping better, which is ridiculous considering how much less time he's spending in bed. But it helps, for some reason, talking to Regulus. There's something steadying about the other boy. Now when he closes his eyes, the darkness is full of stars.
And I think that I just fell in love with you.
Oi, you lot! Hurry up! We're going to be late!
James is walking backwards down the hill towards the pitch, desperately trying to corral the majority of the fifth-year Gryffindors. Mary and Sirius are messing about in some strange mating ritual that's halfway between wrestling and dancing, and not moving them any closer to the Quidditch pitch. Marlene and Dorcas are making bets on the match, and Peter is having an adamant argument with Giffard Abbott about whose chocolate is better, Honeydukes or Cadbury, which for some reason has affected their ability to walk at a reasonable pace. James runs a hand over his face before looking at the lone figure beside him.
You're my favourite, Moody. Have I ever told you that?
Remus watches the chaos unfolding behind them with mild amusement.
Uh-huh.
Wait.
James eyes the bag hanging off of Remus's shoulder.
Did you bring textbooks with you?
Remus clutches at the bag like James is about to rip it away from him, sending his friend a sheepish look.
Might have, yeah.
James throws his hands up over his head.
Forget it. I take it back. I hate all of you equally.
Oh, please.
Sirius starts making his way towards them, Mary now on his back.
You love us.
I'd love you more if you could get your asses moving.
They start walking again, throngs of students in yellow and green moving with them. Sirius rolls his eyes.
I don't know why you're so interested in this game. We all know Hufflepuff's got it in the bag.
Is that a bet I hear, Black?
Oh, not a chance, McKinnon. I've learned my lesson. You cleaned me out last time.
Hufflepuff does not have it in the bag.
Do you wanna...
No, Marlene.
Cowards.
Wow, I never would have expected the Marauders to be so cautious with their money.
Mary drops her face down and plants a kiss on Sirius's cheek. James shoots a quick glance at Mooney, but he's staring straight ahead, hands wrapped tightly around the strap of his bag. They haven't talked about, well, anything since the library. James has gotten the distinct impression that Remus has been going out of his way to avoid being alone with him, which he personally thinks is a bit dramatic. If Remus doesn't want to talk about it, that's fine with James, but that doesn't mean he's going to let his friend suffer.
Or you two. Let's keep it decent, yeah? There are children present.
And by children, do you mean yourself?
Mary's eyebrow raises.
Mary, don't be ridiculous.
James holds a hand to his chest as though deeply offended.
I meant Peter.
Mary slides off of Sirius's back.
I heard that!
Inside voice, sweetie.
We're literally outside!
Don't make me get your father, young man.
Mary raises her brow.
You're not the father?
Obviously not. Sirius is the father, clearly. Never gives you his approval, emotionally distant, can't be relied on.
Twat.
Sirius punches him in the arm before turning to Mary.
He's right, though. I am clearly the father.
The amount of bollocks you two talk is truly astounding.
James grins, opening his mouth to speak before Mary beats him to it.
I'd have thought Remus would be the mother.
Ugh, please don't encourage them. They're insufferable enough as it is.
See?
Mary gestures to the unimpressed blonde. Both James and Sirius look back at her unconvinced.
What exactly about dry, acerbic wit screams mother to you?
Yeah, Mooney's really more of an angsty teenager.
For Christ's sake.
James swings his arm around his friend, pulling him into a hug.
But we love him anyway.
Oh, little Moody.
Remus eventually manages to shove James off, attempting to glare, though his eyes are a bit too bright to make it believable. The truth is, Remus can take a joke better than most people.
All right.
Mary squints at Remus like he's a painting she's trying to work out.
I guess I can see your point.
Trust me.
Sirius pulls Mary in and kisses the top of her head.
We've thought about this.
James doesn't miss the way Remus looks away. The crowd gets thicker as they enter the stadium. James smiles. He loves this. He thought his heart was going to explode the first time he stepped onto the Hogwarts Quidditch pitch. The Potters have a sprawling back garden and some play hoops set up, but it's nothing like this. He never gets less excited, no matter how many games he watches. Already he can feel his skin buzzing with anticipation. The group of them push their way through the throngs of other students looking for a group of seats together. Which wouldn't have been a problem, James thinks bitterly, if his friends could walk in a straight bloody line. In the end, Peter and Abbott find seats together so they can continue the great chocolate debate of 75, and Dorcas and Marlene break off to sit with Lily and Alice. James very determinedly does not look at Evans.
These seats aren't bad.
They finally settle far closer to the ground than James would like.
Ugh.
Oh, don't sulk.
I mean, he's not wrong.
Mary leans over the railing, peering at the grass below.
These seats are rubbish.
Thank you, Macdonald.
James feels deeply validated. Remus is the only one sitting, a textbook already open on his lap. It physically pains James to see it.
I'm gonna wear you down one of these days, you know.
He nudges at him playfully. Remus smiles without looking up.
Sure you will, James.
He turns back to the pitch. It's late afternoon, slightly overcast in a way that the weather always seems to be in autumn. Somehow it makes all the colours more saturated, the greens and yellows. James starts drumming his hands against the railing, impatient for the game to start.
I'm telling you.
Sirius leans next to him.
Hufflepuff has this one in the bag. Morrow is the best seeker at the school.
You better not let Marlene hear you say that.
It's not all about the snitch. Besides, you're underestimating Regulus.
He feels more than he sees Sirius stiffen. The comment even caught Remus's attention, causing him to look up from his reading.
Am I?
James runs a hand through his hair before turning to his best friend.
Sorry, mate, I didn't... Just... Quidditch brain, you know. I wasn't...
But Sirius cuts him off with a wave of his hand.
It's fine. You're right. He's not bad, Reg. Helps that he has the newest broom model as well. Hard for Morrow to compete with that on his 3-year-old clean sweep.
James has to bite down on his tongue to keep from telling Sirius that he doesn't think that that's, strictly speaking, entirely fair. Even if part of him knows that Sirius has a point.
Yeah.
Madam Hooch steps onto the field, distracting them from the newly uncomfortable silence that settled around them. James isn't really thinking about how watching him play might be different now that he knows Regulus. Their conversations in the astronomy tower are so disconnected from everything else that James hasn't really tried to make sense of them, to make them fit. Sure, he sees Regulus every once in a while in the Great Hall, or in the corridors between classes, but they're only glimpses. Nothing has changed, really. So he isn't expecting to feel like anything when Regulus walks out onto the pitch in tight white Quidditch pants and a green kit. Isn't expecting his stomach to drop into the soles of his shoes, beating at about a mile a minute. Sirius sends him a questioning look. He doesn't know what's happening. He doesn't know what the hell this feeling is. Nerves? Is he nervous? Nervous that Sirius might notice? Might figure it out? Might be mad? Well, okay, that last one isn't a might. He knows that Sirius will be mad. He keeps meaning to tell him. He's been meaning to tell him since the first time with Snape. He doesn't know why he hasn't. Mostly he imagines it's because he's not sure what to say. But, oh, Regulus is mounting his broom and James's heart gives another lurch.
You alright there?
Yup. James's hands grip the railing so tightly his knuckles have gone white.
You look like you're going to be sick.
Well, if you're going to be sick, make sure to do it on your other side.
Mary doesn't take her eyes off the pitch. The snitch has been released, the players are in the air, and James is making a concerted effort not to look at anyone.
Oi, not my book, you better not.
Remus's eyes linger on James too.
Prongs. You really do look a bit...
I'm fine. Just... headache. It's okay.
Do you want to go back?
I'm not missing the match.
Junkie!
James just nods and Remus reluctantly goes back to his reading. It's okay. It's okay. This is okay. It's Quidditch. James loves Quidditch. He watches the keepers closest, since they're the ones he needs to know best, distracting himself by breaking down their saves and misses, picking apart the gaps in their training. Focus on the game, he tells himself, just focus on the game. Slowly his breathing evens out, his grip on the railing relaxing.
Fucking foul!
A Slytherin beater nearly knocks a Hufflepuff off her broom with his club.
She'll get back up.
They watch as the girl, who is currently hanging onto her broom with one hand, starts to swing, gaining momentum and then beautifully throwing her leg back over the handle.
Still a fucking foul.
You reckon Slughorn's paying Hooch off?
What's that? 30 to 10?
James doesn't take his eyes off the game.
And no, bastard's too cheap for bribery.
Touché.
Maybe she does it for the Slug Club invite.
Mary smirks.
What? Not fans?
I can't think of anything worse than a dinner party with that toad and a bunch of swats.
Well, fuck you very much.
Oh, come on, Mooney, you know I didn't mean you.
Sirius leans around James so he can shoot Remus a smile.
Besides, you only went the once. Barely counts.
Wasn't worth the heckling I got.
Jeez, you lot really are assholes, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
Though, to be fair, it was a bloody insufferable dinner party.
Aha! See? Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Shit!
James whips his head back to the game.
I missed it. You two. No more bickering until the game is over.
We're not.
Shh.
James waves his hand in Sirius's face, not daring to take his eyes off the game again. The Hufflepuff keeper is new, and James really wants to figure out his strategy before they play against each other. And that's when something small and green catches his attention. He'd been doing a good job of not looking at the Seekers. Not particularly hard considering they're usually on the fringes of the game anyway, but this...
Meanwhile, Black has done a straight dive
For the third time this game, James feels something weird pull at his chest. Be careful, he thinks, before he can help it. Be careful. Be careful. Be careful!
Has he seen the snitch?
Mary has her upper body halfway over the railing.
I don't see anything. James?
He tears his eyes away from the speeding figure to look around him.
No, I don't see it.
Morrow's going now.
They watch as Sirius's younger brother hurtles towards the earth. Be careful. Be careful. Be careful.
Holy shit!
James is about to ask her what she's on about when Regulus abruptly pulls up.
Man, we just witnessed one of the best Watsky feints I've ever seen.
James grins, heart beating out of control as the adrenaline buzzes under his skin. He watches Regulus flying in smooth circles above the game, the Slytherins going absolutely mental.
Morrow's in the grass, poor bloke, look at Black, playing the cool guy. What an incredible show of broom work.
Magic.
James is happy that Sirius is distracted by an excited Mary.
There's Hufflepuff with another goal, bringing the score.
James misses another goal. Distracted again. Now that he's found him, he can't seem to look anywhere else. He watches the cool way that Regulus maneuvers through the game, tracking Morrow, waiting. Seekers require absolute control, self-restraint, the ability to sit back and observe. Regulus was practically born for this. Sirius leans over.
Told you.
No. You said Morrow would get the snitch, which he hasn't.
Sirius rolls his eyes.
I said Hufflepuff would win.
Because Morrow was going to catch the snitch.
Jeez, you're as anal as Marlene with her bits.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Students are holding up their wands and shooting off alternating yellow and black sparks.
Damn! They're really kicking ass this game.
James's eyes bounce around the field from player to player.
What are they doing?
All three of them turn to look at Remus, who shades his eyes with his hand as he stares up at the sky. After a moment or two, he seems to notice the rest of them staring at him.
Yes?
Mooney? Are you watching the match?
Remus rolls his eyes.
I looked up for a second and... But then I saw... well, that.
He jabs his finger at the sky and they follow it to Regulus, currently floating next to the Hufflepuff Seeker. Talking?
Are they having a date in the middle of a Quidditch match?
And then James stops, because he sees it. The tiny fleck of gold just by Morrow's ear. Regulus is apparently laying on the charm because Morrow is suddenly laughing, his entire attention on Regulus and completely oblivious to the snitch currently behind his head. James blinks, rubs his eyes, blinks again, but no, it's really happening. Regulus Black is going to flirt his way into winning this Quidditch match. The announcer is as oblivious as everyone else.
Oh my god, he's caught it. Black has caught the snitch. Where the hell did that come from? Wow. Just wow, Black. Hufflepuff played valiantly, but Black has pulled some significant moves this game. What a way to open the season. That concludes the game.
Regulus glides down onto the pitch, still holding the snitch in his hand, his team tackling him almost as soon as his feet touch the ground. All the Slytherins in the stands are on their feet, stamping and shouting and throwing green scarves around.
How did that just happen?
God, I feel bad for Morrow. No one's gonna let him forget this.
James means to respond, but he's working too hard on controlling his face, on not smiling as broadly and as madly as he currently wants to, watching as Regulus is hoisted up onto his teammates' shoulders. Even now, Regulus doesn't smile with his whole mouth, his happiness hiding in the corners, the golden snitch sparkling in his hand as he holds it up. It makes James breathless. James doesn't expect him to come, not after the first win of the season, but he goes up to the astronomy tower anyway, brings a book and the map. His whole body feels like it's still buzzing from the match, and he can't help running over the plays in his mind again and again. He gives up on homework eventually and starts scribbling down strategies to run by Frank. There's a cool breeze drifting in off the grounds. It's halfway through October now, and the weather is always crisp and sharp. Goosebumps pepper James's skin, but he doesn't mind it. His head snaps up when he hears the door open, blinking as Regulus stumbles in, still in his Quidditch uniform. Oh. James blinks. Regulus's hair is mussed in a way it never is. His pale cheeks pink and eyes wide and glassy.
Well, look who it is.
James can't help but smile, placing his parchment and quill down beside him and turning to face Regulus head on.
Here I am.
Figured you'd be busy celebrating that win.
Regulus continues to stand there.
But you came anyway?
James shrugs, not sure he knows what to say to that. Not sure he could explain it to himself even.
You gonna sit down, or...?
Right.
Regulus nods to himself.
Right. Yeah.
He moves the same way he spoke, with too much thought. One foot placed cautiously in front of the other every step of the way until he's collapsing next to James on the ledge. He smells like Quidditch and fire whiskey.
Good party?
James watches Regulus pull his legs up, crossing them on the ledge. It makes him look painfully sweet, especially when he runs a hand through his messy dark curls.
Party? Oh, yeah, you know.
James arches his brow.
You really are sloshed, aren't you?
Regulus tries and fails not to smile.
I think I may have had an entire bottle of fire whiskey. Also, someone made Harvey wallbangers.
And that's just too much.
Oh my god, I cannot imagine you doing wallbangers.
I'm not sure if I should be insulted by that or not.
Regulus scrunches his face up. He's so much more expressive when he's drunk. James likes it.
They're just not very dignified, are they? Tell me, Did you raise your pinky finger when you drank them?
Oh, fuck off.
Were they served on a silver platter?
At that, Regulus's eyes go wide before quickly looking away.
No. No, they weren't. Merlin, you absolute wankers.
Hey, I had nothing to do with the placement of the refreshments.
Oh no, you don't get to call wallbangers refreshments.
Well, they are.
That has James barely able to contain himself.
There is nothing refreshing about wallbangers.
Maybe. You've just never had very good ones.
James throws his hands up in the air.
I can't believe you. How are you managing to be a snob about this? You pretentious little prick.
Enough! Enough!
Regulus ungracefully reaches forward to cover James's mouth.
So much talking.
The move causes Regulus to fall forward, the hand not currently covering James's mouth being used to hold him up in a crawl position. James feels his breath hitch. Regulus's eyes, big and bright, and so close. They freeze for a minute, not speaking, not moving. Regulus is drunk, but James has no idea what his excuse is. Eventually, Regulus drops his hand away from James's face, but he doesn't move back.
You were brilliant today.
James doesn't know why, he just suddenly feels the need to tell him, needs him to know.
Yeah?
That faint? It was beautiful, Reg, I mean it. God, what? How did I never notice what a fucking star you are?
Literally.
Yeah. Yeah, but you are, though.
Something shifts in Regulus's expression that James doesn't understand. They're still so close he can practically feel his breath.
Guess you weren't looking.
It takes a moment for James to realise what he's saying.
Maybe. But I'm looking now.
In retrospect, he should have seen it coming. He didn't, but he should have. The first thought he has when Regulus pushes forward, pressing their mouths together, half crawling into James's lap, is that he's so warm. His mouth, his hands. For a boy who walks around like he's made of stone, Regulus touches like the sun. After that, his brain sort of short-circuits. He can't think. He can't move. He knows he should have seen this coming, but he didn't. He didn't. And for some reason that keeps him frozen. Everything is overpowered by it. I didn't know. I didn't know this is what we were doing. I didn't know this is who I was. How could I not know? How could I not know? And then the heat is gone. James is shaking and dazed and staring up at Regulus, who has jumped so far back he's on his feet, face broken open in horror as he looks down at James.
I'm sorry. Fuck. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it.
He's backing up towards the door, the pink flush gone from his cheeks.
I swear I didn't.
James wants to make it better, wants to fix this, wants Regulus to never look like that ever again. But he can't. He can't. How could he not know? He flinches when the door slams, and now that he's on his own, he realizes that he isn't breathing right. Too fast and too short. He's seen Mooney like this before, like his body's forgotten how to breathe. James squeezes his eyes shut, trying to get himself under control. Breathe, he commands himself. Breathe, you idiot. In and out. In and out. Fuck, something aches in his chest and he doesn't know what it's from, but it hurts. Breathe. In and out. In and out. It's okay. This is okay. This can be okay. It's just a kiss. Except it isn't. It's Sirius's brother. It's Regulus Black. It's a boy. Breathe. In and out. In and out. A boy who touches like the sun. In and out. In and... In and... In and... In... He doesn't go back to the astronomy tower the next night. Or the night after that. Neither does Regulus. James checks. That's how he spends his free time now. Watching Regulus's name move around the map. It is absolutely and utterly pathetic. But that doesn't stop him.
Hey, earth to prongs.
James looks up from the fireplace to find his three friends staring at him.
Sorry, what?
Halloween party planning? Care to contribute, mate?
I don't know.
He sinks lower in his chair, tilting his head back to look up at the ceiling.
Can't we just do what we did last year?
Can't we just... Are you... Remus, are you hearing this?
James is only vaguely paying attention. Sirius doesn't start shouting again, though, so he considers it a win. Remus's face appears above him.
Hey, Moons.
Remus worries his bottom lip between his teeth, eyes running James over like he's a potion that's not boiling right.
Let's go, shall we?
James arches his brow.
Sorry, I can't go anywhere right now. I'm in the middle of some very important work.
Oh, yeah?
James nods, expression stern.
Mm-hmm. Someone's got to count all the cracks in the ceiling.
Remus smiles, reaching down and grabbing hold of James's wrist.
Come on, you lump, let's go.
If you're going to kidnap me, at least have the decency to tell me where we're going.
James notices that Sirius has retreated to the other side of the common room with Mary. Pete nowhere to be seen. Remus had clearly dismissed them.
I'm not sure kidnappers are known for being particularly decent.
Semantics.
James allows himself to be dragged out of the portrait hall and into the hall. They walk in silence at first, James shoving his newly freed hands into his pockets and making a concerted effort not to look at anyone. The problem with being a generally sociable person is there's no efficient way to communicate to people to stay the fuck away from you when you're having a bad day.
You didn't bring the cloak.
I did not. Very astute of you to notice.
You going to be okay when we get detention for walking around after curfew?
Remus taps the prefect badge on his chest, sending James a sly look.
Ah, the perks of selling out.
Remus only rolls his eyes, continuing to lead the way. The nice thing about Mooney, well, one of several, is that he's not a bad person to talk to. He's not uncomfortable with silence. He can let things be, in a way that James has never been very good at. It doesn't bother Remus that he's sad, not because he doesn't care, but because he understands that sometimes things can't be fixed. They just need to be felt.
Snacks?
They stroll up to the painting of the bowl of fruit, Remus tickling the pair with great dignity.
Hot chocolate.
James follows him through the portrait hall, smiling. He should have guessed.
Hello, sirs. How can we be of help, sirs?
What be you needing, young masters?
At least a dozen house elves swarm them. James never gets used to it. The Potters only have one house elf, Mimi, and she isn't anything like the Hogwarts elves. For starters, she's always giving James shit.
Oh, the little master has lost both his arms, I see. That is why his bed is still unmade. Master James seems to have lost his sight at school. That is why he cannot see the mess on his bedroom floor.
2 mugs of hot chocolate would be lovely if you wouldn't mind.
Remus walks toward the nearest table.
Is it okay if we stay for a
Not
bit?
at all, sirs. Right away, sirs.
Will you be wanting marshmallows, sirs?
Remus turns to James, brow raised.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
He rubs the back of his neck uncomfortably as the little creatures scurry about.
So we're staying then?
James sits down beside Remus. Remus nods.
Figured it might help.
Help?
At that moment, 2 giant mugs, overflowing with mountains of already melting marshmallows, appear in front of them. Remus wraps his fingers around the one closest to him.
God, I love that smell.
James takes hold of his own mug, pressing the warm porcelain between his hands and trying to ignore the dull ache that has been sitting in his chest for the past few days.
You don't have to tell me what's wrong.
James looks up. His friend is lowering his mug back down onto the table, eyes soft, but he can see the concern in them.
But something is wrong, isn't it?
James stares back helplessly. But nothing else comes out. 100 words lodged in his throat. He runs a hand over his face before swallowing them all back down with great difficulty.
I'm just tired.
It's not a lie. The nightmares have made a return. Except now, sometimes Regulus is the one who's screaming, and James never makes it on time. Remus looks at him skeptically.
James, you love Halloween.
That's because Halloween is amazing.
Remus sends him a pointed look that James chooses to ignore, becoming suddenly much more interested in his hot chocolate.
You were barely paying attention earlier. Usually I'd be trying to convince you and Sirius not to sneak a troll into the castle or charm the sofa cushions to growl at people.
Those are both excellent ideas.
And you'd have come up with them if you hadn't been so busy sulking. Ugh.
James drops his head into his hands. Part of him wants to tell Remus, is desperate to tell him, but another part of him is terrified. It was so easy when you could keep Regulus up in that tower, away from everything and everyone else. away from the rest of his life so he didn't have to think about what he was doing.
Listen, like I said, you don't have to tell me, okay?
Remus reaches across the table and taps his shoulder lightly, letting James know that he's there.
But the thing is, well, you're usually kind of an open book, and since not one of us has any idea what's going on with you, it's thrown us for a bit of a loop. Especially Pads.
James scrubs at his face before sitting back and meeting Remus's gaze.
He told you to talk to me.
Remus smirks.
Please. He wanted to talk to you himself. But, since he has the emotional awareness of a toddler, I figured that would be completely useless.
Probably right.
Remus takes another sip of his hot chocolate, waiting. Waiting for James. He's never hidden anything from them before. He knows that they do. Sirius and Remus especially. He sees it sometimes in the tight way they hold their mouths or drop their eyes. He doesn't mind. He knows that it's harder for them. Knows that part of his job, his role, is to be open, to be bright, to prove everything they think about the world wrong. To prove that there is good, and sometimes that's enough. Sometimes the worst thing doesn't happen.
I think I hurt someone. I think I hurt someone and I don't know. Fuck, Remus. I don't know how to fix it.
The obvious questions, the who and the how, don't come. And James is grateful.
Well, assuming that you didn't kill them?
He waits for James to nod in the affirmative.
Have you tried apologizing?
I don't know how.
I'm sorry is usually a good start.
Yeah.
James picks at the table.
Yeah, it's just... I don't know, it's complicated.
When a few minutes pass without Remus saying anything, James forces himself to look up. His friend is watching him thoughtfully. That little crease between his eyes he gets when he's thinking too hard. James braces himself for an onslaught of questions that he can't answer. Not right now. Maybe not ever. But he should have known better. This is Mooney, after all.
Okay, so just talk to them then.
James looks at him flatly.
Look, despite what Sirius Black would have you believe, torturing yourself doesn't solve anything. It sure as hell doesn't do anything for the person you hurt.
His chest aches, thinking about Regulus's face, standing there so fucking scared.
Maybe I'm just a coward.
James, you are without a doubt one of the bravest people I have ever met.
He rolls his eyes, but Remus isn't done.
I swear, the Firstiers think you're actually Godric Gryffindor.
They do not.
James can't quite keep a straight face.
Please. Their eyes get so wide when you walk by, I worry they're going to fall out, but...
He shrugs, a smile in the corner of his mouth.
If they're going to idolize someone, there are worse people they could have chosen.
Remus sips smugly at his hot chocolate before reaching across the table to squeeze his shoulder.
Talk to them, okay?
James nods slowly, playing with his mug for a minute before speaking again.
Listen, speaking of apologies, I've been meaning to... you know.
His hand goes to the back of his neck nervously.
I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable the other day, in the library.
He sees Remus's posture tense as he carefully raises his mug to his lips, taking his time.
I know.
It's late. The candles burning low as one or two of the house elves move around them, preparing for tomorrow, James imagines.
I'm sorry.
Remus continues to sit there silently.
I got that. You don't need to be sorry. You didn't... I just didn't want anyone to know.
James nods.
I know. And they won't.
He doesn't try to convince him not to worry, not to take it so seriously. Not after the way that went last time.
Thank you. Thank you for being so okay with it. With me.
And for the first time, James has the smallest inkling that they may not be talking about the same thing.
Sure. Of course.
They finish their hot chocolates in silence. He has every intention of following Mooney's advice. Really, he does. Except it turns out Regulus is almost constantly with people. Between classes, between meals, at meals. He seems to specifically spend his time with Crouch and Rosier, who, personally, James thinks are a particularly gross pair of companions to attach yourself to, but that's none of his business. He spends a lot of time trying to figure out how to get Regulus on his own, and comparatively little time thinking about what he's actually going to say, what he wants. Those questions are hard and twist his stomach up, and if he thinks about them too long, he loses his nerve. So he doesn't. He ignores them. A time-tested method that has served him well in the past. In the meantime, he is back to being fully invested in party planning.
We'll get the booze from Rosmerta this weekend when we go into Hogsmeade.
He runs down the to-do list in front of him.
You mean Padfoot will get the booze?
Sirius, who had been lying on his back, turns over at that, propping his head up on his hand and grinning.
Jealous, Wormy?
Peter blushes.
I told you I don't fancy her.
James earns a sharp glare from Peter.
What? I'm sorry.
He holds his hands up in surrender.
But you do blush every time her name is even mentioned.
Listen, Pete, I can get you in there. She's not a complicated woman.
Sirius, really? Don't be a creep.
James sees something flicker across Sirius's face, like hurt, before he's able to mask it with a grin.
Only trying to help.
Right, okay. So booze is accounted for. Hagrid is supplying us with a shit ton of pumpkins, and I'm pretty sure I figured out how to charm the ceiling to flash lightning and not drench us all in a torrential downpour.
Is that why the sofas were so soggy the other day?
No comment. Mooney, you've got music covered?
Of course.
Hey,
Sirius sits up, running a hand nervously through his hair. Remus turns to him.
I have these... My uncle, he sent me these records. I don't know if you'd want to take a look at them, or...
He shrugs in a way that is oddly self-conscious.
I don't know if they're really any good. I just thought, if you were looking for something new...
Remus blinks, holding Sirius's gaze.
Yeah, I'd like that. Maybe you can show me later?
Sirius nods, relaxing slightly.
Yeah, cool, of course.
James's eyes bounce between his two friends before going back to the list in front of him.
Pete, you're on snack duty.
I'm gonna clean Honeydukes the fuck out.
Not a boy.
James leans forward to punch him playfully in the arm.
That just leaves...
Oi, James.
Marlene appears, leaning over the back of the sofa.
Do you have those plays we were working on yesterday? I was hoping to run over them.
Her eyes spot the parchment in James's hands and the three other boys around him.
Oh, sorry. Am I interrupting a plotting session?
We don't plot.
Well, I mean, we do plot a little.
James rolls his eyes, tossing the parchment in his hands to the side.
Yeah, Ma. Just give me a sec. It's upstairs.
James heads for the stairs.
Trying to get on Frank's good side?
More like trying not to get shown up by your little brother.
It's a blessing, really, that he's already around the corner at that point, because he isn't sure he manages to keep the grimace off his face. So really, it's Marlene's fault that the first thing he does when he gets up to his room is grab the map, tapping it open on his bed and scanning for the familiar name. He's expecting Regulus to be in his room by now. It's 10:30, 11, maybe the common room with Crouch and Rosier. Except he isn't. He's not in either of those places. James feels his breath hitch slightly, eyes going to the astronomy tower, but he isn't there either. Frank and Alice are, though. James snorts. Good for them. He keeps looking, not sure where else he could be. His eyes run over every inch of the castle before he sees him. James taps the map closed, dropping to his knees to pull the invisibility cloak out from under his bed. He'll have to come up with some excuse to explain his disappearance to the others later. He has no idea what it'll be, but he doesn't bother trying to figure it out now. Marlene is still talking to Sirius when he gets back downstairs. Remus reading, while Pete goes over the party list. James slips out of the portrait hole as a fifth-year girl slips in. It's cold out. James didn't think to grab a sweater. He stashes the cloak in a spot he knows by the Whomping Willow before jogging down to the Quidditch pitch. He sees the snitch first, tiny and gold, blinking in the moonlight, and then, out of the dark, Regulus. James walks onto the field, watching Regulus let the ball go again, watching him wait for it to speed away before he starts doing laps around the pitch. The absolute lunatic. James considers culling up, but decides against it. Instead he sits down on the grass and waits. It's incredible, really, watching Regulus find his target even in the near pitch black. James only catches glimpses of him here and there. The rest of the time he blends in with the sky, disappearing into the stars. Fitting, James thinks. His stomach lurches a little when Regulus finally starts to come down. The calm that had washed over him while he'd been watching quickly falling away. Regulus doesn't see him at first, landing gracefully and pausing for a moment, looking at the snitch in his hands. James waits. wondering what it is that's caught Regulus's attention and then watching as the other boy carefully slips the ball into his pocket.
I can't believe you're stealing a snitch.
James steps forward. Regulus jerks around, hand going right for his wand like it had the night James surprised him in the tower, always ready for an attack. Even in the dim light, James can see the surprise on Regulus's face before he quickly locks it down, expression becoming flat, unreadable, and he knows he should say something, now that they're here, knows that was the whole point of coming. But for a minute all he can do is stare. Regulus is windswept, still breathing heavily from flying, his grey eyes filling with the moon. Regulus drops his broom, arms crossing over his chest, same blank expression on his face.
Lovely night for some queer bashing, huh?
James physically rears back at that.
What?
Don't take too long. Yeah, I have things to do. Oh, and if you could try not to get blood on my jumper, I'd appreciate it. I'm quite fond of this one.
James is still reeling.
What? Do you really think I would?
But then something else hits him.
Has someone done that to you?
Regulus's mask slips ever so slightly, and even though he pulls it back, James still sees, still knows what it means. His hands curl into fists.
Who?
Regulus doesn't say anything, doesn't move.
Who was it, Reg?
He takes a step forward, and that seems to wake Regulus up.
Oh, leave off it. I don't need you to defend my fucking honour, Potter.
Which isn't nearly good enough, because the idea that that they had done that to Regulus.
So?
Regulus's eyes run him up and down, sneering in a way that James hasn't seen in a while.
Not here to mess me up, then. Just here to... what? Talk. I'd rather the beating, if I'm being honest.
James is still too busy trying to get his anger under control to come up with any kind of response to that.
I'll save you the trouble.
Regulus goes on, holding his wand out over his broom and summoning it into his palm without uttering a word.
You're not a poof. You didn't even touch me. You're welcome. Now, if you don't mind, I'm tired, and I want to go to bed.
The problem is, well, one of many, James thinks, is that he's not much of a planner. Sure, pranks and parties he does all right with. Though if he's honest, that's really Mooney's influence. James has always been more of a gut-feeling kind of person. Act now, think later. So you see, he isn't thinking when he reaches out, frustrated with Regulus for walking away again, for not giving him a second to breathe, or think. Mostly he just wants him to wait, but he doesn't have a plan. He isn't thinking, he's following his gut. So when Regulus stumbles back towards him, he doesn't know how his hands find their way to the other boy's face, doesn't remember deciding to move forward, to press into him, lips crashing together. This kiss is different. This time James feels all of it. Every inch of his body humming as Regulus opens his mouth and lets him inside. All James can think is, yes, this. Right here. Stay right here, where I can keep you safe. Regulus's nose is cold, but the rest of him is still so warm, and James can feel it pouring into him, filling his chest. There are universes in this kiss. It is big, gigantic. His hands slide into Regulus's hair. He smells like autumn, like Quidditch. James barely registers it at first. The hand on his chest, flat and pushing. Not hard, but persistent. Stubborn. Eventually forcing a space between them that James doesn't want. Their breathing fills the quiet, the heads bowed close together but no longer touching. Regulus's hand is still flat on his chest.
No.
No?
James instantly steps back. Regulus shakes his head, reaching down and picking up his broom by hand this time.
I'm not doing this.
He turns around and starts walking back towards the castle. James follows after.
What? You started this?
I didn't, actually. You did. Forcing yourself, uninvited and unwanted, into my life. At least I was drunk. What the fuck is your excuse?
James ignores that last question.
If you didn't want me there, you would have gotten rid of me and you know it.
I tried.
Bollocks!
Merlin, keep your voice down, would you? I'd rather not have to deal with Filch catching us.
Which, really, Regulus should have known was a mistake.
Oh no! Wouldn't want to get in trouble. Spoil that spotless record. It would be terrible if someone were to look out here and see 2 students out of bed!
Shut up!
Regulus whips around, pulling James up short.
Christ, what is it you want, Potter?
Which is an annoying and unfair question, James thinks, because quite clearly he has no idea.
I want to talk.
About?
I don't know, Reg. This. Us. This. What happened in the tower. Listen,
No, you see this. This is exactly what I meant when I said I don't want to do this.
James falters for a moment. That Regulus hadn't meant it. Hadn't meant to kiss him. Hadn't crossed James's mind before now. Which he suddenly realizes is maybe a little self-absorbed. Because Regulus had been drunk. And maybe he just... Except the look on his face. And then just now. The kiss just now. That kiss had been meant. On both sides, he was certain. Almost. Mostly. Maybe. He drags a hand through his hair.
Sorry, I should have asked before I just...
His heart is doing this weird thing where it stops every time he tries to get a word out. And for a second, Regulus seems to soften.
Honestly, bloody Gryffindors. That's not what I'm saying.
James just looks at him, not trusting himself to speak.
Really, James? What do you want? What were you hoping to accomplish here?
I don't know.
Brilliant.
Listen, you ask a lot of questions for someone who doesn't give a lot of answers, Reg.
Surprisingly, the younger boy seems to accept that, grey eyes intent on James.
How do you think this goes, Potter? You think we're... what? Gonna walk down the corridor holding hands, snog in the library?
James's chest aches.
I don't know, sure, if that's what you want.
Regulus stares back at him, blinking.
Merlin's sake.
He turns away from James but doesn't start walking again, broom forgotten on the ground as he brings his hands up to his face. They stand there for a minute, just like that. James entirely unsure of what to do with that reaction.
You know what your problem is?
Regulus turns back around.
Nobody has really fucked you up yet. And they're going to. One day. But it's not going to be me. I don't want that job. Give it to someone else.
Reg.
Have you even considered how people would react? How absolutely absurd everything I just suggested is? Have you thought about... fuck, I don't know. Your parents?
Which takes James by surprise because no, he hasn't. Not at all.
I know. They're perfect and lovely and selfless. I lived with Sirius long enough to hear them praised like saints. But they're still pure bloods, still from old families. And you are their only son. You really think they'll be okay with you being a poof? Or... or my brother, who may have disagreed with our parents on many things, but not this.
Reg.
James steps closer, not entirely sure that Regulus is taking full breaths between his words.
Which is to say nothing of the fact that the boy that you have chosen to fuck everyone else over for is me.
What's wrong with you?
He doesn't think about it. Of course he doesn't. The words just come out of him because he means them. But for some reason, those are the words that break through. The words that get Regulus to slow down for one bloody second. Not that they do anything to soften the hard look in his eyes.
Don't act dumb, James. It's beneath you.
James shakes his head.
Look, you're right. I haven't thought about any of that.
Regulus looks about ready to bolt again, so James talks fast.
I just thought, listen, you want to know what I want. I want to talk to you. Not just right now, but all the time. I miss you. I miss talking to you. I haven't been sleeping.
Regulus looks at him questioningly.
I have these nightmares. But you, I don't know. Being around you, it made me feel okay again. It made me feel safe. And you're right. My life has been easy, I know that. But I've seen enough to understand that good things are rare. And you're...
James looks at him, trying to lay out all the thoughts he can't articulate in the space between them.
You're good, Rich.
The other boy just stares back at him, eyes wide. And James feels like his chest is going to burst open, his ribs aching in his skin.
James.
Think about it, okay? Come to the astronomy tower tomorrow night.
Regulus is impossibly still, a deer in the headlights, looking at James like he's never seen him before. James swallows with difficulty. He's too much. He's too much. He knows he is. Always has been. Slowly, Regulus nods.
Okay, good.
This time, when Regulus starts walking away, James doesn't try to stop him. The wind feels colder now, James shivering as he wraps his arms across his chest. He wonders if everything will feel colder now, after Regulus. The next day is a bit of a blur. James doesn't get much sleep, but that's par for the course at this point. He looks for Regulus at breakfast, but doesn't see him. Marlene gives him shit about not coming back with the plays, and Sirius demands a full explanation.
Just needed some fresh air.
Fresh air? Is that some kind of euphemism I'm not aware of?
James just shrugs, doing his best not to meet Remus's knowing stare.
Prongs?
Hey, Sirius, don't you have to show me those records your uncle sent you?
James sends out a silent thanks to the universe for Remus bloody Lupin. He drags himself from class to class all day, retreating to his room when it's over and doing his best not to absolutely lose it. Peter comes up at one point. James is lying on his bed, tossing his snitch up and down, curtains drawn.
James, you okay?
Fine. Not feeling well.
Okay, do you want something, or...?
I just want to sleep.
Right, yeah, okay.
He listens as the door closes, then grabs the invisibility cloak and heads for the tower. He waits facing the door, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. He should have brought something to do, to distract him. Not that anything would have. Still, it'll be okay if Regulus doesn't come. It will. Better, actually. Probably. So, his knees bob up and down impatiently as he runs over every stupid thing he said the night before and every stupid thing he didn't say but absolutely should have. He doesn't know he's got himself here, or how something he didn't even know he wanted a week ago now feels so important. He sighs, dropping his head into his hands and pulling at his hair. Fuck, he thinks. Fuck, he's not coming, is he? But that's okay, he reminds himself. Better, even. It's pathetic how quickly his head snaps up when he finally hears the door open. How instantly he fills with warmth at the sight of Regulus. Stiff and uncomfortable, but here. So very here. James feels himself calm for the first time all day. Because at least if he's here, they can deal with this. At least if he's here, then James isn't in this on his own. It's several moments before Regulus clears his throat, still standing at the door, eyeing James wearily.
No one can know.
James blinks, trying to catch up.
Okay.
I mean it. Not my brother, not Lupin, not Pettigrew. Whatever we do here, whatever this is, nobody knows.
James nods.
Okay. Nobody knows.
Regulus doesn't say anything else, just keeps standing across the tower looking like he's ready to run.
Reg. Come here.
James has a smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. It takes him a minute. So much going on behind those eyes. But eventually he moves forward. Stiff and overly studied like he was when he was drunk, thinking too much, trying too hard. He stops in front of James, grey eyes even more intense up close. And James honestly doesn't know where he gets the goal, but he reaches up and hooks his fingers through Regulus's belt loops, tugging him forward. He doesn't really think Regulus will do it, doesn't really think he'll follow, but he does, sliding onto James's lap and... Oh, James likes that. Aloof, proper Regulus in his lap. He runs his hands up his back, coming to hold his face, thumbs brushing his cheeks, and he sees it then, sees the fear and uncertainty and softness that Regulus is always trying so hard to hide.
Hey.
James pulls lightly on Regulus's hair, exposing his neck. He leans in and presses his mouth to the delicate skin, feeling Regulus's pulse race.
You're going to be insufferable, aren't you?
James feels the words vibrate against his mouth as he continues kissing Regulus's neck.
Yes. God, yes.
Give to him my life, all the sweet things I can find. I found the diary underneath the tree and started reading about me. The words began to stick and tears to flow. Their meaning now was clear to see. The love they'd waited for was someone else. wouldn't you know it? They wouldn't show it. And as I go through this strife, I will wish for him my life. All the sweet things they can find, all the sweet things